stimulation, whether it be a video or some kind of data up on the Vision Pros. And it, like, people are already isolated having their headphones in and their phones out during the day. And I sound like I'm, 90, but it's true. And in terms of the need of people needing constant stimulation, things like TikTok, where you're watching a video, but then under the video, there's a like Subway Surfer or some other kind of stimulation for you to look at. Our brains are just being filled with this useless data and these useless screens that I think the AR and the VR tech is really only going to make that worse and really only isolate us from each other more. And I don't even like people, right? I don't even like talking to strangers that much, but I still think it's a net negative for the species. And you can quote me on that. That being said, if I had one, I would totally use it. But I'm not paying $3,500 for it, that's for sure. So I don't know. It seems like Meta and Apple and all these big tech companies, they really want to commit to this VR, AR future. And I understand they have to set the trend, right? They have to be the ones to do it. And it's weird at first, and then everybody will eventually adopt it. I think the only way you're going to get away with this is if you do the Tony Stark glasses or the Google, what are they called? Google goggles, right? Something like that. Google Glass, maybe. Where they have to look like sunglasses, right? Or like prescription glasses. They have to look normal because the Vision Pros look ridiculous on people's faces. You can't tell me otherwise. You can't tell me when you put that thing on your head and it like simulates your eyes coming out. It looks ridiculous. I cannot believe that they released it like that. It's got to be something that already looks like something we know, right? But the tech is not really streamlined enough for that. And if it is, it's ridiculously expensive and nobody can afford it anyway. So you're waiting for that bridge point of accessibility and price point, which I talk about a lot when it comes to video games, actually. So, hey, back on the topic of the show. But I think until you bridge those two things where the average consumer can get it and benefit from it and figure out how to use it, because not everybody is as technically savvy, as they could be or should be, I don't understand how this is going to be profitable. I don't understand what the point of all this is. I don't know. It boggles my mind. I saw the $3.8 billion lost on this, and I just had to talk about it because that is so much money, right? Like, not if you're talking about like the national debt, but $3.8 billion. I don't even know. Like, it's a number that you can't even wrap your head around, and they just burned it. So I don't know. If you've got a Apple Vision Pro, let me know. And if you can afford an Apple Vision Pro, you should subscribe to my Patreon because it's only $5. And if you can afford that, you can definitely afford the Patreon. Anyway, that's enough about me. Old man yells at cloud. Old man yells at cloud while he looks through his VR glasses. But yeah, that's the news for today. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. You're listening to No Credits Rolled.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, and we're back on No Credits Rolled. I just got done covering some news stories for this week, and now we are on to the review portion of the show. First game I want to cover today is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is developed and published by Ubisoft, specifically Ubisoft Montpellier. It's a Metroidvania-style action platformer. Everybody take a drink every time I say the phrase Metroidvania during this review, because boy, did I write it down a lot. Anyway, Ubisoft Montpellier is also known for developing the Rayman games and the Beyond Good and Evil games. The only Rayman game I played was one of the more recent ones, the 2D platformer ones, and that game was pretty good. And you can definitely see that 2D platformer DNA here in Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Now, there was a demo for this game a little while back before I fully had the whole thing in my hands. At the time, I didn't really like that demo. I thought it felt pretty double A, and I really didn't vibe with the mechanics or the feel of the game. But now having the full game, I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed this. It's definitely one of the best Metroidvania-style games that I've played. It's got so much heart and style to it, although if you're new to these kind of games, it might be kind of a tough first entry. There's a lot of aspects to it that might not be for everybody, right? There's some difficulty aspects to it with the platforming that might be tough for some folks. I struggled significantly in certain parts of this game, so you might too. I don't know. My touchstones for Metroidvanias are not Metroid or Castlevania. I've never finished either any games in those franchises. I've played a handful. I started the Metroid Prime remaster, but I didn't finish that, so I'll probably talk about that on this show one day whenever I go back to it. And I played those God of War ripoff Castlevania games, and I'm pretty sure those don't count in terms of being a Metroidvania. So my main touchstone for those types of games are the Ori games, Ori and the Blind Forest, and the other one. Those games are fantastic. Highly recommend them. They're on Xbox and PC. They're some of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Fantastic music, beautiful gameplay, just a really unique and magical experience. But that being said, take my opinion on this genre with a grain of salt, right? I'm not an expert. I haven't been in the trenches, jumping and platforming for 20 years. I've only played a handful of these kind of games. For me, one of the things Prince of Persia nails is the movement and the platforming. There are sections in this game where I completed a platforming section, and it felt like a boss fight. Like I had just beaten a boss because of the level of precision and timing that's required. Just like Ori and the other games in the genre, you unlock more abilities for traversal and navigation as you go. And just like in a lot of those other games, as you unlock each one, it feels incredible. And it really feels like you're getting this monumental shift in gameplay, whether that be a double jump or a dash or I don't want to spoil the other powers, but in all these games, you always get a double jump, you always get a dash. And it feels great, right? And when it unlocks those new areas of the map for you, or you know that you can go back and now access these areas you previously couldn't. It's a wonderful feeling, and it's why people enjoy these games, and it's why I enjoy these games. One of the things this game does that is a little bit unique from a game like Ori is that when you come across an area that you might not be able to access yet because you lack the ability, you can hold down on the D-pad and you'll create a little memory, which is essentially a screenshot that then saves on the map. And then when you look at the big map, you can hover over wherever you saved it, click on it, and it'll show you exactly what you screenshotted, so you can remind yourself of what you were doing. And it ties into the story of the game, too, because the game's all about, the plot is dealing a lot with time, timey-wimey stuff, time travel, time displacement, kind of. So being able to save these memories all around the map is very, very cool, and it feels really good to go around and check them off once you know, hey, I've got double jump now, I can go back to this area, jump up here, go and delete the memory, and now I've opened up this whole new pathway for myself. It's a really satisfying game loop. The combat is another highlight of this game. It's really fast-paced and involves dodging, jumping, and parrying, and the parrying is a particular standout. It captures the frenetic energy of a sword fight, because a lot of the enemies you're fighting are blade-based enemies, but there are certain times where there is a yellow flash of a parry, and if you time that one properly and get the parry, you get these really unique animations, these really cool, unique animations for every enemy. And it's cool every single time, right? Like you could see the same one 10 times, and it's the combination of the feeling of nailing the parry, but then also getting the reward of sometimes it's an instant kill. Yeah, you can even do them during boss fights, and it takes a chunk of their health away. Particularly in the boss fights, which I'll cover in a second. the parry mechanic in the boss fights, when you do that, it's like this super cool, like anime cutscene almost, right? You parry and you get this cool attack, and it never gets old. It's one of those things that just never gets old. But it's also a fundamental of the combat. So for those of you that enjoy parrying and dodging and things like that, kind of like in a Souls game, and getting that timing window down, you're going to enjoy this as well. The boss fights, like I said, the boss fights are very, very cool. I've done a bunch of them so far. There's multiple phases to each one. Some of them are a little bit more unique than others, or not unique, more distinct than others. You can really tell the difference in the phases. They're awesome, right? Like the boss designs are all very cool. Some of the mechanics for some of the fights are a little bit cheesy, but take some getting used to. Again, it reminds me a little bit of Dark Souls, where I haven't played Dark Souls. I want to say that. I've played Elden Ring, Bloodborne, a little bit of Sekiro, Dark Souls 3. So like I'm familiar with the genre is what I'm trying to get at. But it reminds me a lot of those games because the boss designs are unique. The boss mechanics are all for the most part unique, and they've all got phases, and there's a real sense of accomplishment when you beat the bosses. Now that being said, the difficulty of these bosses so far has not been that tough, right? It's taken me a couple tries on some of them, but it's not like an Elden Ring where I'm doing like 25 attempts to beat, what was that guy's name? Godric? One of the first bosses in Elden Ring was like notoriously tough when that game first came out, but the boss fights are a particular standout. And the enemy variety, there's a ton of enemy variety in the game, all different kinds, flying, running, jumping, shooting. Each area kind of has their own enemies. And, you know, the more enemy variety, the better, because it forces you to change up how you play. The music and the sound design are also a huge highlight. I think each section of the map gets its own kind of music to it. Just the sound design alone, if you platforming, if you running and double jumping, you know, sliding on a wall, jumping off that, dashing through traps, it sounds great, especially turned all the way up or with headphones on. It manages to capture that feel of I played Prince of Persia: Sands of Time when I was younger, and I think I played that other one that came out. I don't remember what it was called, but when the movie came out, that game wasn't very good, but it captured that 3D feeling of those games of platforming, you know, running, parkour, you know, the stuff that they turn into Assassin's Creed. But it manages to capture that feeling of inertia and movement in a 2D platformer, and it's really, really neat. It's really cool, and it's something that I'm surprised they were able to pull off as effectively as they did. And that ties in with the sound design. Everything sounds great. The score, I guess you could call it, or the soundtrack, a lot of unique songs. All the boss themes are very cool. Like I've said before, I'm not a big story guy when it comes to a lot of these games, but the characters in this game are kind of what draw me in. You start off as a member of the Immortals, which are like a Persian ancient history Justice League kind of. Right off the bat, you're introduced to all your different warrior buddies, and they all look cool, and they all have unique designs as well, just like everything else in the game. And then it's not really a spoiler because it's like the beginning of the game. You end up getting betrayed, and then you end up having to fight each of these people as you go through the game. So it sets it up really well because you're like, oh, you start at the top, right? You start on the Avengers or whatever, and then you end up having to go and fight each member of these teams, which is why they all have a unique weapon or a gimmick to them when they're initially shown off. It's a great way to set up how the game's going to go, and it's really satisfying to develop that relation. They give you a little bit in the beginning of your relationship relative to all these other characters, and it's like just enough to have you buy in when you meet them later on down the road, and once everything has kind of hit the fan, it makes it so that you care. You care enough to be invested in the fight other than just wanting to defeat a boss. Now, there's also a lot of really cool time mechanics. I mean, it wouldn't be Prince of Persia without some kind of time mechanic. Like I said, I played Sands of Time. There are a lot of things very similar to that. And in terms of the story, there are a lot of really cool things they do with time disruption. That it almost reminded me of like an episode of Star Trek, where people are displaced out of time or living in multiple timelines, or time is accelerated in one area. Really cool stuff. And if you enjoyed the time stuff in Sands of Time, or if you like those kind of stories in general, I would recommend playing this as well because it does play a key role in the story. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Let me know what you think of it if you have played it. I know it kind of flew under the radar at the beginning of the year, but I would recommend checking it out. Definitely a fantastic 3D platformer, or 2D platformer, excuse me, and definitely worth the time. All right, now we're going to try a little something a little different. I know we're a video game podcast, like I said, but it's kind of tough to talk about this next game without talking about a TV show as well. So I want to talk about the Fallout TV show on Amazon Prime. It was so good, guys. Like, I was so shocked by how good it was. Kind of like Prince of Persia, I went in with pretty low expectations, and I was completely blown away by the Fallout show. I'm so glad we're in a world where video game adaptations don't suck anymore, and they aren't looked at immediately with a sort of side eye of, oh, it's a video game adaptation, so it's not going to be good. This is another fantastic example of an adaptation that is done right, that is done well, that is done exactly how, if you're a fan of the games or if you're a newcomer, you can enjoy this show. And I cannot believe they pulled it off. I have some notes I wrote here. Fallout on Amazon Prime captures the spirit of the games in so many different ways. It may be the ultimate adaptation. From the characters to the music to the world design to the humor, everything hit the nail on the head. Whether you have played a Fallout game before or you just want to jump into the wasteland for the first time, Amazon's Fallout is a fantastic experience through and through. And, you know, that's true. I really don't have a whole lot of negatives about the show. I've only watched through it once, and I binged the back half of it because I was enjoying it so much that I wanted to just finish it. And I really don't ever do that with television. If something comes out, I prefer when things come out weekly because I like watching week to week. Especially if it's something I'm enjoying. I typically don't like to just binge it because then there's no more left and you really can't savor it. But that wasn't the case with this show. I was so interested in where the story was going to go and what was going to happen next that there was one day that I had a Lego set I had to build, and I just watched like 4 episodes in a row just to finish it. For those of you that are wondering what Lego set I was building, it was the Wolverine X-Men 97 Claw, and it was pretty cool when I built it. Anyway, but yeah, this Amazon Fallout show is incredible. So after I enjoyed the show, and I don't want to spend too much time reviewing the show because I don't review TV shows on this program. Bottom line, go watch it, right? Even if you've never played Fallout, go watch it. It's a great show. But after I really enjoyed the show, I had the hankering, like I'm sure a ton of other people are having now, to get back into one of the games. So I decided to load up my New Vegas save, my Fallout New Vegas save. And since most people really kind of regard that as the best of the genre, so this is what we're reviewing today. Developed by Obsidian Entertainment and released in 2010. That's right, folks. We're reviewing a 14-year-old game on this show. I'm sure there are 14 years. That is a very long time, and I feel old. However, despite the age, Fallout New Vegas still rocks, folks. It still rocks. No spoilers for the show, but I'll just say if you watch the show and you want to pick up a Fallout, this is probably the one that's most similar in terms of themes, environment, kind of characters. It kind of does the Western thing a little bit, like Fallout New Vegas and the show. It still holds up, right? I mean, there are some things about it that are dated. It's I don't have access to mods, so I'm playing on console, so the game does feel dated at times. I'm sure with mods on PC, because like I said, you can probably get this game for like $5 on PC. You could probably modernize it more because there's a ton of mods on there. The thing that holds up the most about Fallout New Vegas is the writing. There are so many quests in this game that you will stumble upon that will take 30 minutes of your time. It's that classic Bethesda game design that I think a lot of their games nowadays are lacking, right? It's that feeling of Skyrim where you have an objective across the map and you walk and you find 15 different quests along the way that take up, 3 hours of your time. It's the same stuff that happens in this game, and it's great. I've described this as a vibes game, and I think people use the term vibes way too much now, but it really is. I mean, there's in-game radios that you can listen to, which as someone that loves radio, you're already hitting a sweet spot for me. But you can have your radio on the whole time as you're walking around the game, which also plays into gameplay because depending on where you are, you can get certain signals versus other areas. But yeah, turning on the radio in the game and just walking across the wasteland, and you just wait to see what you encounter. It's a feeling of adventure and exploration that the fact that they were able to pull this off in 2010 is crazy. Now, I never really liked the Fallout games when I was a kid because I thought they were boring. I'll be honest, I thought they were very boring. But that's because I was very into Call of Duty at the time, and I wanted that faster paced shooter. I didn't really understand like how to play an RPG or the nuances of playing RPGs. But now going back, man, I wish I would have told my 10-year-old self to just keep playing this game, because I would have spent a whole summer just lost in the Mojave Wasteland here. It's incredible, and it's one of those things where, you know, I've been going back and forth between Prince of Persia and New Vegas for this show, and you know, when I want to just kind of not turn my brain off, because the writing and stuff is the best part, so you do need to focus on that. But when you kind of just want to immerse yourself in this world and pop on and kind of just wander around, you can. And there was another game I talked about recently where I made a similar comparison, where you kind of just want to exist in this world, which is ironic considering it's like a nuclear wasteland, but it's got so much character to it, and it's got so many things to find and explore, and you just feel like a wanderer, you know, or in the game you're a courier, so you're walking around. It's just got such a unique feel to it that I really think is what makes it special and why it still stands up today. And also the writing, again, which I've already said. Really cool, multiple, I'll give you an example. There was a quest where I needed to go and I had to find this one vault, and I had to figure out how they were growing these plants. It's like one of the most iconic quests in the game, so you might have already heard of it. But the way that I found that quest is one of like 4 different ways that you are given the quest to go to this vault. And then as I'm leaving the person that gave me the quest, another person comes up to me and says, hey, you know, people have been sent to this vault before. You should be careful. Like, that guy that just gave you the quest doesn't really care what happens to you. So then you can change what you do. You can work for the lady that warned you, or you can work for the guy that gave you the quest initially. And then, like I said, there are like 4 different ways to get to that vault through other quests that the game kind of just evolves from there. It almost like... It reminds me a little bit of Baldur's Gate, because you can also, which is a thing that you can't do in games like Skyrim, you can kill anyone. Like, anybody can die in this game, and then you just can't do their quest for them anymore. Like, that's just it. Whereas in Skyrim, they'll take a knee, you know, charge up and come back if they're an essential NPC. Not in this game. You can just blow anybody away that you want. Which, you know, if you're not really big on sneaking or talking, you just want to kill everyone, I mean, assuming you have like the health and the ammo to back it up, you can. I actually just recently unlocked a perk where you just do more damage of all types and it's like the perk description is like, you are better at killing because you love it so much. So I was like, I don't know if I want to take that as a compliment, but hey, I'll take the buff. But yeah, like I say, there are some negatives in 2024 that you just are not going to be able to avoid. The game looks rough. Graphically, it looks rough. And I want to make that distinction. Graphically, it looks rough, but there is an art direction there that is very deliberate. In terms of the desert versus the Las Vegas Strip, when you eventually get to that, there is art direction there, not to mention the art direction of Fallout in general, that 1950s post-war, Cold War kind of art style. I'm sure someone that knows art can tell me what that's supposed to be called, but it still feels very distinct. It just looks rough because it's a 14-year-old game and there's really no getting around that. And, you know, Bethesda has never really been known for their graphical prowess. But I think that's probably the 2 biggest things are probably the graphics and the gunplay. Those have never really been Fallout strong suits. But people, I think if you're going to go into a Fallout game, you got to know that you're not playing a Call of Duty. You're playing something more akin to a Baldur's Gate or an RPG, where the main drive here is supposed to be doing these quests and your skill checks and making relationships with your companions and the different ways that quests intertwine and the moral decisions you can make. And then, you know, the gunplay is kind of separate from that, which is why they've got the VAT system where time stops and you can target different enemy body parts. Right, like that was put into the game because the aiming was so tough. So it's not supposed to be this like AAA first-person shooter. It's a AAA RPG, and I think as an RPG, it's one of the best there ever is. As an RPG, it's one of the best there's ever been. And I just have one last note here before we wrap up our discussion today, what I would give for a New Vegas remastered, right? Like, they don't really do that. They haven't really remastered any of their other games, to my knowledge. I'm probably forgetting a really obvious one. But what I would give, you don't even have to change. Like, just update the graphics, or like if you could put it in Fallout 4's engine, because that game obviously looks a little bit more modern. I don't know. What I would give is all I'm saying. Just to polish it up a little bit. I mean, just think if they did that with Skyrim too, or like with Fallout 3. I don't know. I just think it would be a license to print money. But I want to know, have you watched the Fallout show? Have you played a Fallout? Are you going to get into a Fallout because of the show? I think it's getting a lot of new people on board, and it's getting a lot of people back into Fallout after the kind of middling success that Fallout 76 had, which I think is great. You know, I think if we get a Fallout 5 now because of this, I think that's going to be a good thing. Hopefully they can bounce back from Starfield, which, you know, that game sucks. So looking forward to a Fallout 5 or whatever comes next in the Fallout universe. But yeah, let me know what you think. It's going to wrap up episode 7 of No Credits Rolled. Thank you so much for listening. I just want to thank Philly Drinkers again for having the affiliation with the show. Don't forget to use the link in the description to get all of your Philly sports merch that you could possibly need from the folks over at Philly Drinkers. A couple other things I want to hit before we wrap up today. You can email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also call in. That's right, our call-in line has been ice cold since we've made it, so feel free to leave a voicemail. You can call in at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713, and we might just play it on the air. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, check out the Patreon. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps me to buy a cargo ship full of Apple Vision Pros. But yeah, that's all I got for you on today's episode of No Credits Rolled. I'll see you next time.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com. Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
No credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen, and today we're going to be talking about some depressing gaming news, unfortunately, as well as my thoughts on Fallout 76 and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I'm sure you've all been eagerly anticipating my Suicide Squad review. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that the fine folks over at Philly Drinkers have partnered with the show to provide you awesome Philly sports merch for all your favorite teams. Unfortunately, the Sixers have bounced, but the Phillies are red hot right now, so make sure to check out Philly Drinkers for all your Philadelphia sports merch needs. Use the link in the description to get a discount, and every purchase helps out the show. There's also one other thing I wanted to touch on before we get into the news. We, of course, have a call-in line here, and someone was actually nice enough to call in this time. See if you recognize the voice.
Sam, hello. Sean here. I'm the actor behind Scratch in Baldur's Gate 3. I hope you're keeping well, friend. A little birdie told me that you are starting your own podcast talking about video games and Baldur's Gate 3, no less, which I think is absolutely awesome, and I can't wait to listen in. So I thought, what better way to start things off for you than by giving you some Scratch facts from Baldur's Gate 3. Are you ready? Let's go. 1. Having Scratch in your party is useful for many different things. Not only can he find items without the need for a survival check, but he can also give you an additional perception check. He can revive fallen enemies with his lick, and also he can break concentration saving throws. Cool, right? The best boy of many tricks and talents. 2. If you have Speak with Animals, our favourite spell and feature, am I right? And you have Scratch in your party running around Faerun, when he barks to let you know that he's found something, that is actually me doing the barking. So the barking with Speak with Animals is different to without. 3. Baldur's Gate had approximately 17,000 strands of ending, which is crazy. So just imagine how many versions of the lines we had to record as well. So with Scratch, I mean, there was if you found the owlbear, if you didn't have the owlbear. There's obviously all the different gender options as well, male, female, non-binary. There's if you're in favour, if you're not in favour with Scratch. Yes, I know there's a kind of approval thing as well. So the options are multiple. Just imagine how complicated the epilogue was to write. What I love about the video game world or industry is the community. I've honestly never met as passionate and dedicated and close-knit a community as that of Baldur's Gate 3. I really do think that the people are what make games special. The players, obviously. So I think running a podcast on video games, it's a fundamental part of the community. So, you know, what better way than to celebrate the worlds we love, right? So, Slam, from me, Sean, and from Scratch, the best boy in all of Faerun, we wish you all the very best in the podcasts and games and adventures that you're going to cover. We have no doubt that it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's right, folks. That is, in fact, Sean Mendham, the voice of Scratch the dog from Baldur's Gate 3, one of my favorite characters. And I'm sure if you've met Scratch in Baldur's Gate 3, he's one of your favorite characters as well. My friend Joe, who we had on the show before a couple episodes ago to talk about Helldivers and Baldur's Gate, Joe was nice enough to get me a cameo for the show. So thanks to Joe and thanks to Sean as well. You know, there's a lot of people that go into making a game, and it's always nice to hear from some of the talent too. But of course, you can always call in. I just got to plug the phone line while I can. You can always call in at 856-209-0713. Of course, that's 856-209-0713. And I'd like to hear from you too. All right, enough dilly-dallying. Let's get into the show. So yes, I did tease it at the beginning. We do have some depressing news today to cover, and that is, of course, the Xbox layoffs. It always sucks to talk about layoffs, but Xbox recently announced it was closing a handful of studios. This included Arcane Austin, they created Redfall, but also the Dishonored series, Prey, and Deathloop. Microsoft also announced the closure of Tango Gameworks. They created Hi-Fi Rush, which was widely seen as a success for Xbox at the time. especially at a time when the brand was really struggling. Hi-Fi Rush kind of shadow dropped, came out of nowhere, and people loved it. And, I've only played maybe an hour or two of it. I really do want to complete it. And it's something I would talk about on this show if I did play it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I know that it was very widely accepted, as a great game. Also, Alpha Dog Games is being closed. They're a mobile game developer. They made a game called Wraithborn in 2012 and the recent game Mighty Doom, which is a Doom mobile game. I actually did check that out. I played that a little bit. It's a Doom mobile game, but of course you hate to see anyone get laid off, no matter what kind of stuff they're working on. Of course, all three of these studios are affiliated with Bethesda Studios. Microsoft acquired ZeniMax Media, which is Bethesda's parent company, for $7.5 billion back in 2021. And it was a big deal at the time. I think I talked about it on Insights into Things. I believe we did it once for the Activision Blizzard thing. But either way, that Bethesda acquisition was one of those things, those dominoes we talk about when we talk about Microsoft, setting up the dominoes, waiting for this big payoff. And this is kind of the opposite of that, where you acquire a studio and now you're doing these big layoffs. And in some cases, when these studios are producing games that are critically successful and you're shuttering them, how does that make you look? Not super great. When people think Bethesda, they think Elder Scrolls 6. They think maybe a new Fallout game with the success of the Fallout show. But there's other things that Bethesda does. Those Dishonored games, people were really hoping to get a third one of those. It doesn't look like that's going to happen now. Prey, people love that Prey game. I enjoyed it. Now, again, didn't finish it. No credits rolled. What do you expect? But Arcane Austin was really known for these like open world, what am I trying to think of here? Like the intricate first person games. I mean, Deathloop, everybody loved that game. I wasn't a big fan of it. People love Deathloop. I think it won all kinds of awards when it came out. I might have won Game of the Year. I should probably fact check that. Of course, they had Redfall, right, which was not well received critically or financially. But they were working on it, right? There was a Redfall update that was supposed to come out. There was DLC that was still being worked on at the time of this closure. So who knows what's going to happen with that? And, if that game's even going to be given a chance at a second chance, if that makes any sense. So at the time of this recording, this is all pretty fresh in the news cycle, right? There's a lot of strong emotions, a lot is still unknown, a lot is still to come. There are rumors that there's going to be more cuts. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds this week because I don't want to speak out of turn or, sort of shoot from the hip. But I feel like I couldn't, if we're going to talk about the news, we have to talk about this, right? I'm not a news outlet, but I do have some sort of obligation to cover these big stories. And this is definitely a big story this week. Like I said, more cuts are rumored to be coming, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. You hate to see it no matter what. It's tough to see. Layoffs suck, right? Everybody knows that. I don't think anybody would agree. Anybody would say that layoffs are a fun thing. Personally, I've seen layoffs in my industry recently. Everybody's favorite holiday is the end of quarter one when these cuts tend to happen. I'm seeing it now. I've got friends that were laid off, friends that were cut. It all comes down to the bottom line. I know there are economic justifications for layoff. If you are in that position to be making those kind of decisions. But, I don't know if I care. At the end of the day, people are buying into an industry, right? You're buying into the industry you want to pursue with the hope that they can provide for their families and themselves. And with that, hopefully comes a sense of job security. But we're seeing time and time again that there isn't job security. Whether that be in the gaming industry that has had all kinds of layoffs almost on a weekly basis, or in another industry where you think you are in a secure position and then all of a sudden cuts come around again and your name's on the list. Like I said, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, and I'm only 24, so I haven't maybe accepted the way that the world seems to work. But if companies continuously put themselves in positions where layoffs are expected, where layoffs are part of the plan, maybe there's something wrong with the plan in the first place, right? Maybe we need to make a world or a system where, practices of overhiring or downsizing or studio consolidations where these things don't need to happen, where people can land the job they want and feel safe in that job and not have to worry about, the hangman coming around every couple months or so and people getting fired because, profits for the entire company are down or need to be up. And because those profits can always be higher, thanks to capitalism, maybe we're never going to be able to satisfy that beast. I don't know. I'm definitely rambling at this point. So back on track to Xbox. What does this mean for Xbox? I asked that question a lot. We've all been waiting for Xbox to have their big moment with all these game studio acquisitions, Bethesda, Activision. I saw rumors that they're thinking about putting Call of Duty on Games Pass. What are they doing, right? What is their plan going forward? If acquisitions just lead to layoffs, what is the end game? I mean, Tango Gameworks was a critical success, or had a critical success, with Hi-Fi Rush. Unfortunately, financially, the numbers were hurt with the game releasing on Games Pass, which we've talked about before, either on this show or on Insights into Things. When things come out on Games Pass, while more people are able to access it, from a financial point of view, you're typically going to lose money because I believe you are paid a sum, right? You're paid up front by Xbox to acquire this game. And then on Games Pass, you lose some of that revenue from someone just buying the game outright because they're just going to wait for it to come to Games Pass. I mean, that's how I played Hi-Fi Rush, was because Shadow dropped on Games Pass that day. But when your Xbox sets up a system where we say, hey, we're going to acquire your studio, we're going to publish your game, and we're going to publish it on Games Pass, and then we're going to can your studio when it doesn't financially perform well, but because it's on Games Pass is part of the reason why it's not financially performing well. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and it doesn't really add up. This is a quote from Aaron Greenberg, who was Xbox's marketing vice president. This is back in 2023. Back in 2023, there were rumors about Hi-Fi Rush not performing well financially, so Greenberg came out and said this. He says, quote, Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release. Well, it turns out they could be happier because they ended up, closing the studio. So I don't know. I don't know if maybe that was just corporate speak at the time to kind of quell those rumors and preserve Microsoft's initiative with these studios going forward. But I mean, there's tons of clips you can find online of, guys like Phil Spencer and all them going on different shows. The Kind of Funny Xcast in particular. Phil did a big thing last year after Redfall came out, a big interview, taking a lot of personal accountability for it. But there are statements in even that interview that are now coming into question because of how Xbox is treating these studios. And, Phil Spencer's one guy, right? He's not like this evil maniacal overlord that is making all these decisions. There's a lot of people behind the scenes at the level higher up in the company that are making these decisions. And of course, at the end of the day, these are all human beings that make these decisions. But when it comes to the corporate side of things, I have a difficult time remembering that. So it's just worth saying. So yeah, Xbox acquires studios and then, like I just said, puts their games on Games Pass, impacts sales, and then isn't happy with the sales. There seems to be some kind of logic breakdown here. This is also right after a couple months ago, Hi-Fi Rush became multi-platform, right? It was one of those Xbox games that got put out on PlayStation. This included Sea of Thieves and Grounded. I guess it was too little too late, right, in terms of profit. They didn't make enough money with this multi-platform deal. I think if this would have gotten done sooner, maybe you would have seen more benefit, right? If it wasn't just the Games Pass ecosystem, then maybe they would have had more sales in general for the game. But it really just seems like Xbox is just pivoting left and right with what they want to do going forward. And it's not a good look, I don't think. I don't have it in the notes here, but I do know we're waiting on the Indiana Jones game. Let me just verify that is being published by ZeniMax. Yeah, so Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, it's developed by Machine Games, who are the Wolfenstein people, but it's being published by Bethesda. So, maybe Bethesda will be able to kind of recoup from this if that Indiana Jones game comes out and is a big hit, which I suspect it will be, barring it being terrible. All of the signs are pointing that it should be a good game, but we've been disappointed in the past. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know what the plan is for Xbox now, right? I could probably do another whole episode on this. I did an episode on it before, a little more optimistically looking at Xbox plans going forward. But with the treatment of this and the shuttering of all these Bethesda studios, it's difficult to see what the plan is next. And is this the end of, not the end, but this is a big hit on Xbox's plan of acquiring these studios and making games out of them, or making games from them. It's not a good look, especially if you are a studio that Xbox is looking to acquire and you say, well, this is how you treated these Bethesda devs. How are you going to treat us? You know, I don't know. It's not a good look, bottom line. But hey, you know, maybe Elder Scrolls 6 will fix all of our problems when it comes out in 25 years. Anyway, moving on to story number 2 today, we've got some Helldivers drama. I'm sure you have seen this story. It's pretty tough to avoid. But speaking of companies tanking their own brand, let's talk about Sony and the recent Helldivers 2 fiasco. That's right, folks. The Xbots and the Sony ponies. No one's safe this week. I'm coming after both of you. Anyway, despite it seeming to dominate the gaming news feed, believe it or not, this story has only been going on for like a week. It started back on May the 3rd when Sony announced that Steam players would have to link a PlayStation Network account in order to play Helldivers 2. At the time, this was from a community post on Steam. Their justification was due to the, quote, technical issues the game faced and at launch that prevented this change from being mandatory, saying that the, quote, grace period was now over. The grace period for linking your account. They also said safety was a concern, saying that the priority was, quote, protecting our players and upholding the values of safety and security provided on PlayStation and PlayStation Studios games, which you can take that with a grain of salt considering the massive amount of data leaks that Sony has had in the last couple of years. But yeah, player safety was allegedly one of the concerns they cited. Now, PC gamers are one of those groups you definitely don't want to piss off, and those PC gamers on Steam without PSN accounts or who just didn't want to do this were justifiably angry with this change. It's worth keeping in mind that Helldivers 2 was Sony's largest PC launch ever. They've been doing a lot of PC ports of games like Last of Us, which I don't think worked too well because the port was bad. Spider-Man, they've mostly been dealing in ports. But Helldivers was one of the first games that was a Sony Interactive Entertainment launch that was huge. I mean, obviously, I've talked about Helldivers on the show before. Big fan. But the PC community also latched onto this game because of, I don't know why. It's popular to play with your friends, and using the Steam ecosystem is probably even easier. And this linking, forcing people to have a PSN account attached to it, kind of came out of nowhere. Well, that's not necessarily true, because you can see when you initially were to sign up for the game that it did say that this link could become a possibility. And there's screenshots of that you can find online of it saying that. So people should have been aware of this, but I think the idea was that it took them so long without doing it that PC gamers just assumed it was never going to happen. And not to mention with the runaway success of Helldivers 2, all the technical issues it had at launch, it seemed like they were just going to let this sleeping dog lie and not have to worry about the potential backlash. Well, that wasn't the case. So after this announcement, people began review bombing the game. I have the number 14,000 negative reviews here, but I saw another source saying 20,000 reviews once it was all said and done. A bunch of negative reviews posted on Steam, tanking this game's what's the word? The review score, I guess. On Steam where it says mostly positive, overwhelmingly positive, mostly negative, whatever that score is, the user rating. So with 14,000 to 20,000 negative reviews, it obviously tanked the game's review score, and you had people from Arrowhead, jokingly tweeting, "Ooh, right in the reviews, hit us right in the review score," as well as a ton of angry tweets, Discord posts, just a lot of public outrage from the Helldivers community as a whole, not just the PC gamers, but everybody. Nobody seemed to be, on board for this. For the record, I agree this was a ridiculous decision on Sony's part. It definitely reads as tone deaf. I'm poking fun at PC gamers. I just find it funny when gamers come together on anything and get all worked up. It's just the passion. I find it amusing. There are a lot of issues in the world, but I'm glad that we can rally and save Helldivers 2. I'm glad that is where we can direct our energy. It's also worth noting there are 177 countries where you simply can't make a PSN account, and Sony went ahead and delisted Helldivers 2 in those countries. That's pretty bad. 177 countries where you can no longer buy the game. Who knows how that's going to affect sales? I'll skip to the end a little bit here for that. Spoilers, as of this recording, those 177 countries still are delisted and still cannot buy the game. The countries aren't delisted. The game is delisted in those countries, and you still can't purchase the game. So that's sort of the last lingering question because, of course, if you've heard, Sony did end up reversing this decision just days later after the public outcry. So, once again, complaining works, especially when you're very, very loud about it. People were also threatening to boycott the game, the review bums. It was just a lot of backlash that I think Sony really couldn't avoid. There's now a community-made operation if you don't know, in Helldivers 2, there are operations that are basically player-wide, that if the whole player base completes the operation, you get some kind of reward. Well, to deal with the negative review scores for the game, there was a community-made operation in real life, which I don't know if most gamers are familiar with, called Operation Cleanup, which now encourages players to leave positive Steam scores to correct the rating. So this shows that, the Helldivers community is really special, for better or worse. You had the negativity side of it when the, review bombing and things like that, which you could say is justifiable considering the shooting. So, the shooting of the foot that Sony did, making this link thing possibility, and how many people they were alienating from the game because of it. But then you also see the positive side, right? The reversing of this review bombing now that things have been corrected, that this link has been done away with. We are trying to make things right. And by we, I mean them, because I didn't do that. A fun note, well, this is not fun at all, actually. I don't know why I said that. An interesting note, the Helldivers 2 community manager was fired during this whole debacle for encouraging people to refund and negatively review the game. They did have a hilarious quote. They said, quote, "Generally, it's not a good idea to tell people to refund and leave negative reviews when you're a community manager." They said, "I appreciate all the support and appreciate even more that everyone can play the game again without restrictions. I knew I was taking a risk with what I said about refunding and changing reviews. I stand by it." And you got to respect that, right? You got to respect standing by your guns, especially in an age where, when these cuts happen, people are terrified to speak out against the company doing the cuts because they don't want to get fired. When in reality, the company really doesn't care about you in the first place. So it's nice to see someone saying what they think and sticking by it, even if it did lead to them losing their job. At least they've still got their convictions, which you can't really pay your bills with convictions, but, it's nice to see that sometimes anyway. I think overall this shows how dedicated this Helldivers fan base is, and it also shows, I said it before, but it shows how tone-deaf Sony can be. They had a money printing machine in Helldivers 2, and they basically poured water on it. And with those 177 countries still delisted, I wonder how this is going to affect Helldivers 2 going forward. Is this a permanent stain on the game, or is it going to bounce back? Personally, I think it's going to bounce back. I think the game is undeniable in so many ways. I mean, it's still ridiculously popular months after coming out. My friends and I still play it. It's in our regular rotation. New players are getting on all the time. I just hope that Sony takes this as a lesson for, one, how important this game is right now for their brand and for their lineup of games, and two, how to not make this mistake again, right? To be a little bit more conscious of how vocal this community can be and how how bought in they are on this game, and that can pay off if you leverage it properly, not tanking the game, but instead rewarding that kind of dedication and player base. But anyway, that's going to wrap up the news portion for today's show. Like I said, some depressing stuff. You hate to talk about layoffs, but it is news, and it's something that is not going to go away if it's going to keep happening. And of course, with the Sony blunder here with Helldivers 2, it's corporations making decisions that are questionable. But anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the review portion of the show. You're listening to No Credits Rolled.
In Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Whoa! All right, we're back on No Credits Rolled. Now it's time for the review portion of the show. First game we've got here is Fallout 76. Yes, that's right, folks. We're doing back-to-back weeks of Fallout reviews. For both of the games that I have to talk about today, I don't really have a whole lot to say. I've only just started both of them, but I did want to include them in the show just because I like to do reviews for these shows, either way. But I just wanted to give that caveat, take what I say with a grain of salt. You should always take what I say with a grain of salt, but in particular with these two reviews, just because I'm only a couple hours into each game. So if you don't know, Fallout 76 is the latest entry in the Fallout series. It came out a while ago still, but technically it's the latest entry. And it's Bethesda's attempt at a semi-MMO set in the Fallout universe. Like I said, I'm in the very early game still, but it's still got that addicting gameplay loop of any Fallout game that I've played. It's still fun to explore the environment and find, environmental storytelling or things on data logs or computers and just existing in this wasteland. This time around, it's actually not much of a wasteland. It's set in Appalachia. So you've got a lot more woods, a lot more trees, and you got a little bit of that in Fallout 4. But most people know Fallout 3 in New Vegas. It's a much more barren wasteland, a lot more open, vast spaces of nothingness. Fallout 76 is not really like that. It's lots of woods, mountainous terrain. It's different, which I really like, and it's one of the reasons I'm coming back to it is because I really do like exploring this environment and seeing the variety in the design and the trees and things like that. It's unique, and I think it's cool. I described Fallout New Vegas as a vibes game. 76 is no different. I think in general, Fallout is a vibes game. It's a vibes series, and I said last week I hate using the term vibes, but I'm going to do it again. It's fun to just put that radio on and just kind of wander the wasteland. For me personally, that really never gets old. Even if I'm just walking, instantly shooting something and instantly killing it without much of a fight. It's fun to just exist in that universe with the music, with the atmosphere of those games. And this game as well, I kind of just hang out. The gameplay itself is pretty slow-paced, as you'd expect from a Fallout game. It does take a lot of notes from Fallout 4 in terms of how they changed the combat in that game. A lot of quality-of-life stuff. The guns are pretty similar to what you find in Fallout 4 as well. A lot of they introduced these pipe weapons that were part of their push to make guns moddable. A lot of crafting involved in Fallout 4. All those systems exist in 76, right? The base building that they had in 4, the gun modification, the armor modification, all that stuff got put into 76 as part of making it like an MMO. And they've really doubled down on those mechanics as well. The combat is definitely not the highlight of this game, and I didn't really go into it expecting it to be. It's the storytelling. It's the environment. It's wandering around, like I've said a bunch of times in this review. I'm still finding cool side quests and stories as I journey through the world, but I'm basically so far only fighting small animals, large. There's these naked mole rats you can basically one-shot. There's these really terrifying possum creatures. I really don't like them. I don't know what they're called in the game, but it's like a mutated possum. It's like the size of a tire, and it's got like 2 heads. Possums in general just kind of freak me out, so it having 2 heads kind of a problem. This is an anti-possum podcast. I hate to break it to you, but the design is cool. And it's something we haven't seen in a Fallout game before. You know, you expect rad roaches or bloat flies and things like that, but because it's in a different setting, it's presenting these new enemy types. The main enemies I've been fighting are the Scorched, which are a lot like ghouls, but apparently different. They're like these zombies that run at you and you shoot them and they die pretty much immediately. Sometimes they have guns. I know there are different Scorched enemies. Like I briefly saw a Scorched beast, which is like a dragon. It looked like a dragon. I don't know what it's supposed to be. Like I said, I'm very early in the game, but I do hope we get a little bit more enemy variety from the Scorched, because so far it has just been these basically ghouls that you'd find in another Fallout game, but they're never really much of a threat. I've never gotten close to dying. I've got like 50 stims, so even if I did, I could just instantly heal. But again, the combat is really not what's drawing me in here. It's the exploration. I've attempted to con my friends into downloading it, so I'm curious how the Fallout game will feel when you're not alone, right? So much of this game is about being alone and wandering. What is that like when you've got friends with you and you're all wandering together? Will it be boring? Maybe. We'll see. But this game definitely has its hooks in me. I keep wanting to pop on, walk around for a bit, or just complete one more quest. And those are the aspects that remind me a lot of an MMO. I played a lot of Star Wars The Old Republic Online, and it was that drive of just, all right, let me accept all these quests, wander out into the open world, and then come back and turn in all these quests, and you get that dopamine rush, you know, turning in quest after quest after quest, seeing your XP go up. It's a fun gameplay loop, and I think they've implemented that well in the Fallout gameplay system. Like I said, they've kept a lot of the base building stuff. Now it's a camp system, where you've got a camp hub, essentially, but you can move the camp as you explore the open world. I haven't really figured out what the point of this is yet. You can definitely build a base, but for where I'm at now, I'm moving my camp a lot because I have to, you know, you need your chest where you dump your extra loot, or you need crafting benches, which you all have to craft every time you make a new camp, by the way, which is annoying. But I wonder if, as you get further into the game, if you're supposed to establish a more permanent base. And I guess that would tie in with the PvP elements of the game, because there is PvP. If you want it, you can find that. You can fight other players. And I've seen, you know, the map is actually a highlight of the game. It's designed like a map you'd see for like a national park or like a theme park, which is different from the other Fallout games. It's really cool. It's fun to look at that map. It's got all kinds of little designs on it. But you can also see other player bases and other player encampments. So I've seen those. I haven't encountered any other players yet, but I know that they're out there, and I wonder if that is where that camp system will come into play. So far, I'm just playing it like a single-player Fallout game, so we'll see what that's like once I get into those multiplayer aspects. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for Fallout 76 so far. Like I said, still very early in the game, but I'm still enjoying it. You know, it's definitely got its hooks in me. And even though it is semi-mindless, I still enjoy getting in there, leveling up, getting new gear, exploring new environments. It's a lot of fun. The game is free, not free, but if you've got something like a Games Pass or the Sony PlayStation equivalent of a Games Pass, it's up a lot of places. I know Amazon was just giving it away for the Fallout show, so you can probably pick it up severely discounted or maybe free if you've got any one of these services. So the second game I want to talk about today is Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Still a mouthful of a title all these months later. I know I did cover maybe the first episode of this show. I covered this game and its sales numbers and how disappointing people found it. Despite that, I've personally been very excited to talk about this game for a while. And thankfully, Gamefly came through. I'm not sponsored by Gamefly. Not yet. I'd like to be. But I have signed up for Gamefly sort of for this show because, you know, I've been duped before buying games only to have them become available on Games Pass or PlayStation Games Pass the next day, or to have them get discounted, or to just buy a game and not like it, and I'm just stuck with that purchase. So with Gamefly, I'm able to sort of skirt that and pay one flat fee per month and get those games one at a time, play them. If I don't like them, send them back, no problem. Again, not sponsored, but I'd like to be. Anyway, back to Suicide Squad. I know this game did not get well reviewed, but it seemed like something that might be up my alley. I know I talked about that when I covered it before, about enjoying that kind of mindless looter-shooter grind of something like a Destiny or a Borderlands, and that was what this game looked like, and that's pretty much what this game is. So far, I've only put maybe 5 to 6 hours in. I haven't even killed a Justice League member yet. I know, you're saying, Sam, what is even the point? You're supposed to kill the Justice League. Well, I'm taking every side quest possible just to get the right gear, because they basically make you do that before you do the big Justice League mission, Justice League member mission. The first one you get is a Green Lantern fight, but you've got to level and grind to get the right gear. It is the most bare bones, cut and dry grind you can imagine. So if you don't like that, you're not going to enjoy this game. It turns out, a lot of those reviews were accurate. The game is very aggressively middle of the road. It is a looter shooter. And like I said, in the most bare bones of sense, you are shooting and you sometimes get loot. Some pros, all right? Let's start with the pros. I'm coming very negative at this, but there are pros. The visuals in cutscenes, I want to emphasize that, in cutscenes are great. The game is graphically very impressive, in particular when it comes to character models. When there are close-ups on characters like Harley Quinn and Captain Boomerang especially, they look fantastic. It's the team behind the Arkham games, so you still have that visual fidelity that they've always had, even going back all the way to Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. Obviously, those games are a little bit older, but they still had the art direction to back it up, which still lets them hold up to this day. In this case, it's mostly just graphics, just graphical power. And like I said, Harley Quinn and Captain Boomerang in particular are really standouts in terms of looking like real human beings. King Shark, it's a little bit tough because he's a shark, and Deadshot wears a helmet a lot of the time, so what are you going to do? Another pro, the traversal is fun. It's a bit janky depending on what character you use. In the beginning of the game, before you pick a character to start the actual campaign with, they have you play as all 4 characters so you can kind of get a feel for them. I started my main campaign as Captain Boomerang just because I think the Flash is cool and I wanted to have Flash powers, which is what Captain Boomerang has. But recently I switched to Deadshot because I had heard that he was the most fun character to play as, and that is correct. Deadshot is by far the most fun character to play as. He's got a jetpack, which is way cooler than anything else that any other character has. King Shark just kind of jumps. He's like the Hulk, sort of. Harley Quinn has a grapple hook, which they try to emulate the grapple hook. If you've played it in the Arkham games, the grapple hook tether and then overshoot and diving, and there's no gliding. It's just the grapple hook. She kind of swings like Spider-Man. But I really think they botched it. It does not feel as good as it did in those Arkham games, which is a shame because you'd think that they would just be able to translate that 1-to-1 and have it work. But the biggest, well, actually, I'll save that for the cons part. I'm still in the pros part, believe it or not. The Deadshot. Deadshot's a lot of fun. It's for Captain Boomerang, I stopped playing as him because it's a very cool concept. He essentially has Speed Force gauntlets that lets him teleport, but it's tough to make that fun in gameplay when you're just sitting there waiting for your boomerang to get somewhere so you can teleport to it. You're just watching it fly. It's the same thing that happened in Gotham Knights, if anybody ever played that. Tim Drake in that game, Robin, he also teleported, and you were just sitting there waiting to select a point to teleport to, which is not fun inherently, I don't think. It defeats the point of traversal when you're just teleporting, zipping from location to location. Like I said, Deadshot has a jetpack, so you can fly in any direction. Then you can also, there's like an afterburner thing you can do where you can boost. Then if you get too close to overheating, you can hit another button and he kind of does like a little jump, which gives you another bar of jetpack, which then, you can continue flying. So it's kind of a fun dance controlling your overheating with your boost, with your which way you want to go before you get to the next rooftop before you overheat. And I did find that pretty enjoyable. But now on to the cons. The cons are pretty much everything else. The gunplay is pretty boring, with all the characters feeling very similar. I mean, they even can overlap in their guns, right? Deadshot can use a revolver. Harley Quinn can use a revolver. There's revolvers, SMGs, assault rifles, snipers, and shotguns. And then only King Shark can use heavy LMGs like a minigun. For the most part, a lot of these guns overlap between the different characters. So everybody kind of ends up feeling the same. Everyone just shoots guns, and that's it. It's surprising, especially when you've got these distinct characters. Why would you not make them feel distinct? I mean, they all have their own travel methods, their own traversal methods, but when it comes down to the actual gunplay, you're just shooting people. I found that Deadshot, again, is a lot of fun because he can hover in midair with his jetpack to shoot, so that's a little bit different than a Captain Boomerang, who you can zip around to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you have a shotgun. So you're zipping in, blasting with a shotgun, zipping away. It sounds kind of fun when I describe it like that, but it's really not. At the end of the day, you're just shooting everything in the head. There are also a lot of weird aspects to the gunplay. There's this thing called counter shots, where if something is about to shoot you or just shot you, you can do a counter shot, which sometimes breaks its shield, so then you can damage it. There's a shield recharge mechanic where if you shoot enemies in the legs, you can then do a melee attack on them and recharge your shield, and that's the only way to get shield back. It's really strange. It was like they were confined to this gun mechanic, the fact that everybody has to shoot guns, and then they wanted to make it feel unique and kind of do their own thing within the world of it being a third-person shooter. It ends up just being really complicated because you end up getting mission after mission where the gimmick of the mission is, well, this enemy will only take damage if you countershot him, which just means you're sitting there waiting, doing no damage to this enemy until your countershot recharges. Then you shoot him with that, then you can do damage. It just like artificially extends the gameplay. So that's not fun. The biggest issue, well, one of the biggest issues I've encountered is in gameplay. The gameplay is like ridiculously visually noisy. I sent a clip to Joe the other day of all the things popping up on screen, and you can read anybody's review or look at anybody's review or gameplay, and you'll see it right away. The amount of things that pop up on screen, but from damage numbers to health to objective markers to just visual effects, it is overwhelming. And, you know, I play a lot of video games. I've been playing games my whole life. It takes a lot for me to become visually overwhelmed. And this game did it pretty much right away, like to the point where I had no idea what was happening sometimes because I'm in a group of enemies and I'm meleeing and hitting them up in the air and blowing up and shooting and flying. And it was just... It's like a joke, right? It feels like it's a meme of how much there is on screen. I talked about last week the TikTok thing of having so many visual stimuli, and this is like that game. This is the game if you want to be visually stimulated to the point of like going into a coma. There are so many things on screen that you can't even tell what's happening. And from what I can tell, there is a disable HUD button, but I don't know how much that would help because I don't think you can go in and disable individual visual elements like I would expect. You're kind of just stuck with it. And it is very, very overwhelming. The writing is kind of cringe. It's a little bit closer to David Ayer's Suicide Squad than James Gunn's Suicide Squad, if you catch my drift. The location, it's set in Metropolis, which should be amazing, especially from the people who made Gotham and those Arkham games so memorable. Unfortunately, you spend an insane amount of time on rooftops. They even say right in the beginning of the game, it's too dangerous to go in the street. Don't go in the street. Now, there's really not a gameplay reason for that. I mean, sometimes there's tanks on the ground, but nothing is hard to kill in this game. Everything you can just like demolish. You're a god, effectively. You spend so much time on, like, I would say you spend 95% of your time in this game on rooftops. And so you don't really see Metropolis at the ground level. Everything you do, you're just flying from rooftop to rooftop to rooftop. Maybe sometimes it's a higher building, or maybe sometimes it's a lower building. It reminds me of DC Universe Online, which is a deep cut. I don't know if anyone still plays that game, but I remember in that game running around, I think it was Metropolis, whatever the starting area is in that game when you're a good guy. And it's just like this barren, like empty city, and you're just running straight up a building waiting to get to the top of it. It reminded me a lot of that. So you don't really get a feel for the city like you would in Batman, in the Batman games, other than just looking down on it from a rooftop. And there's not enough visual distinction from the different districts, especially in Arkham Knight. They did a great job with that, making each district feel unique. In this version of Metropolis, they really don't do that, which is a shame because I think Metropolis is a great location that we haven't really seen fully fleshed out in a lot of games, especially with this kind of budget. But anyway, I do plan to finish the main story. It does interest me, sort of. I'm a fan of these characters. You know, I'm a comic book fan. I'm a DC fan. So it is fun to see this scenario play out, even if the gameplay is not fun. I do want to see the Justice League. They do a good job showing how good the Justice League are, like to the point of parody before they all get turned into like demons. So I'm sure they're gonna go, a million degrees in the other direction once we see these characters in their evil version. We get Kevin Conroy's Batman, which is great, even though Batman is obviously evil in this. He's killing people, but he's like the big brother in the game, which I think is kind of fun. He's the one running things on the ground, and you get Kevin Conroy hamming it up as an evil Batman. I know people were disappointed that this is one of his last performances, and this is how they're showing the character. I really don't have a problem with it. I think it's fun. You can tell he's having fun with it too. I think, like I said, he's hamming it up, being this evil like dictator Batman. I think it's fun. What else do we have here for it? I just wanted to say, and this is really just for me, the game is worse than the Avengers game, which is surprising, right? I'm a diehard fan of that Avengers game. I will go to bat for it. At least in the Avengers game, each character felt unique and had unique abilities. In this game, if you didn't have the character models, right, like if you didn't know you were playing as King Shark or didn't know you were playing as Harley Quinn, the shooting mechanic, you would feel, everybody feels the same for the most part, right? There are very little differences from character to character, which is ridiculous considering it is a multiplayer game. It's an always online game that has multiplayer in it. And you can have, theoretically, a squad of 4 where everybody is playing as their own character, their own unique DC character. And most of the time, it just feels like 4 goons with guns just shooting people. But yes, the moral of the story here is sometimes reviews are correct, and you should trust them, because this game lived up to every review that I ever read in terms of it being very middle of the road, in terms of it being boring, in terms of the gunplay. Yeah, all that was correct. But those are my thoughts on Suicide Squad and Fallout 76. Let me know what you think. I'm curious if any of you are getting back into Fallout 76 with the show, or if you tried Suicide Squad at launch and didn't like it, or you did like it. Maybe you're still playing it, because there is a battle pass, by the way. Maybe you're grinding the battle pass to get all your Joker skins and stuff. I don't know. But anyway, that's going to wrap up episode 8 of No Credits Rolled. Thank you so much for listening. Of course, you can always email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. We'll always be happy to hear from you. I plugged it at the beginning of the show, but you can always call in, leave us a voicemail at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713, and we might just play it on the air. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, leave a review if you can. All that helps us out quite a bit. If you're feeling generous, we do have a Patreon. You can subscribe there, and you can recommend what I should be playing, what I should be talking about. I would love to hear from you as well. But that's going to do it for today's episode of No Credits Rolled. I'll see you next time.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
No Credits Rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of No Credits Rolled. For our 5th episode, I wanted to try something a little bit different. So for today, I interviewed my pal Joe about 2 of our favorite games. All right, so for today's review portion of the show, I actually brought a special guest. I thought episode 5, hey, that's halfway to 10, so let's try to make it a special occasion. I brought on my friend, my pal, saver of human lives, Nurse Joe. How's it going, Joe?
Hey, Sam. I'm very excited to be on your show.
You sound
I
excited.
listen to every episode.
Yeah, you're one of
I'm
our
very
number one
excited.
listeners.
Yeah, every episode on the way to work lines up perfectly. Halfway there, halfway home.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we do. We have a call-in line, which I will plug now. You can always call into the show at that's 856-209-0713. You can call in and leave a message. And when I made the call-in line, I had a sneaking suspicion of the first person that would utilize the call-in line, and it was my best friend, one of my best friends, Joe. And we'll play the audio here.
Hey, Sam, this is Joe, long-time listener, first-time caller. I was listening to your last episode where you announced your call-in line. Super exciting news. Great episode. You jumped in at the end, talked about Battlefront 1 and 2. I'm going to be looking forward to playing some 10-year-old games or something. I just wanted to tell you about that, make you feel a little old. Those games are actually 20 years old. So wanted to give you a little bit of existential dread there. Have a good one. Keep making the episodes. Wish they came out more often. Highlighted them like 2 weeks. See you, Sam. Thanks.
We have two different games I wanted to cover, and I've been wanting to have you on for a while because we have a lot of games we want to discuss, and I decided, hey, we'll do a double feature today. So the first game we're going to cover today is Helldivers 2. I'm sure if you're online at all, you've probably seen clips of this game. It's sweeping the internet, sweeping the gaming community, and after much convincing, I was able to get Joe to buy it. So, Joe, what are your top level thoughts on Helldivers 2?
Helldivers 2 is awesome. It's a lot of fun. Definitely a game you want to play with your friends, which is why you had to try so hard to convince us to get it. Sam tends to get us to try to convince us to get a lot of games, and we play them once and put them down.
And they're all good.
It's always like, oh, Sam's trying to get us another game. Okay. They're not all good. And then this one, you know what, screw it. I've got my nurse money now. And so I bought the game, did a couple rounds, and was hooked pretty fast. I love sci-fi media and stuff. And then the Starship Troopers element is just so good. Barely making it out of a mission is just such a great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think that if you like Starship Troopers, this is basically a Starship Troopers game, but they couldn't get the license. So I think off the bat, if you have any interest in that movie or that kind of tone, that like mocking like military industrial complex stuff, I think you should definitely check it out. Just some quick facts about it. It's from Arrowhead Game Studios. It's published by Sony Interactive, so it is a PlayStation exclusive. I don't know if it's on PC, but it's definitely on PlayStation if you want to check it out. It is.
I think it's on PC. I think my brother was looking to get it.
Okay. Yeah, because Sony's been branching more into the PC realm as well. But yeah, one of the biggest things, like you said, this is definitely a multiplayer shooter first, off the top. It's way more fun with friends. I've tried playing it by myself, and I kind of, it's not anywhere near as fun. I don't know if you've tried solo, right? Do you have the same experience or? Oh,
definitely. It's more for just being able to communicate and yell and shout at your friends, and bark, pretend orders. It makes it more fun, but sometimes you get a random that's just hilarious too. I don't talk in voice chat, but sometimes you start a mission before you even launch the pod. You get 3 level 50s ready to carry you to victory, which is fun too.
Yeah, you mentioned getting that voice chat. One of the first games that Joe and I played, we had this Scottish guy, and I think he thought the game was real life. He was very into it. And it really made one of like my first multiplayer experiences in the game pretty special because the guy had like narrated everything we did. I don't know. It was something else. And I was like, okay, this was what makes this game different. That like communal aspect of it, which is incorporated in the gameplay too, because when you're doing these different missions, it might seem like it's just the same, 5 or 10 types of quests, but it's all cumulative with the whole player base that you're liberating these planets and the world is kind of changing as you go. It's a really unique way of approaching that live service genre that we so often see with games like Destiny, where it can get kind of stale and you don't really feel like you're part of a big group, but in Helldivers, you really do.
Especially with community missions like that. There's all kinds of like memes and stuff now about like Malevelon Creek, where Helldivers got destroyed by the bots because everyone's all fighting the easier bugs, and the things happen in that world map that affect the gameplay. Like you just liberate a planet, and that's how when they released the mechs was after we liberated the planet that was in the lore in charge of making the mechs.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got to read up on the lore.
Like For Honor, where you should. It's very funny. And like all the major orders have like a reason for them.
Oh, really? Wow. Well, there you go. You learn something new every day, folks.
The map reminds me of like For Honor, where there's like the war going on.
Oh yeah,
taken.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Stuff, but instead of against each other, you're all working together.
You mentioned with the creek. That was before my time with the game, so I missed out on those memes. But it does speak to one of the things about the game that I love so much, and I think you mentioned it at the top, the intensity of it, right? I feel like almost every mission, I mean, we've gotten better at the game as we've played, but if you bump up your difficulty to hard or challenging, every mission has something new and something intense about it that keeps the gameplay feeling fresh. It's not necessarily realistic, but it's very easy to get caught up in the moment of what you're doing.
Yeah, like diving away from an explosion. Changing your loadout is a big thing that I enjoy about the game. Is when you're going to a different planet or you're going to fight the bots instead of the bugs, like your loadout would be different. Like a flamethrower is great for the bugs, but not so much for the bots. Or the impact grenade can't destroy the bot creation facilities, but it can destroy the bug holes. Or the stratagems you call in even can make a big difference in whether you survive or not.
Yeah, and there's the discussion of like the meta of the game. It is a PvE shooter. You're not fighting other players. So when the first initial patch came out, they nerfed a lot of the good guns. Well, you are fighting your teammates when you blow them up by accident, but that's really easy. The initial patch when it came out nerfed a lot of the good guns, and there was the uproar in the fan base because I think it opens up a wider discussion of the gamer culture, which I cringe saying that, but like everyone's chasing the meta for so many multiplayer shooters. Like I think Warzone is a big reason for it, but in Helldivers, it's really not about that. It's about what best suits the mission, and sometimes you just want to have fun too and use a weapon that you enjoy just because it's cool.
Yeah, I have not had good experience with that shoulder-mounted laser as far as killing the enemies goes. But it feels cool to have a shoulder-mounted laser gun that that doesn't overheat. And then on cold planets, I'm always running that laser gun on the cold planets because it doesn't overheat as fast. Like little elements like that they would have been just as good a game without it, but it really does add it. Yeah, and I say this a lot when I review games for this show. I think above all else, the game is a ton of fun, right? Like I tried getting everybody into Payday 2, and in that game, you're doing the same missions over and over again too, or even a Destiny as well. You're doing the same missions over and over again. But there's a little bit extra sauce in Helldivers 2 that makes the fact that you're doing the same things over and over again enjoyable, and you don't really notice, you don't really get that fatigue. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the gameplay and the intensity of it, and how every time you do a mission, there's some X factor that kind of makes you it makes it feel different, even though the objective might be the same. And that's like the best way to say it, because it is just fun. Like I can't remember the last game we played together that was just fun. It was not frustrating. You play Apex and you get dunked on. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's that there's not the human element where you get dunked on and then someone teabags you and calls you a loser in chat or something like that. Like it feels like an actual, especially if you do the robot missions. And I think I've got some gameplay footage. Maybe we'll put that in the video version if I'm not lazy. But it feels like you're fighting, I don't know, maybe it's the AI design of it, the bugs and the robots. There's enough AI there to make them feel just smart enough that you feel cool taking them out. They're not super dumb. And, technically this is a AA game, so there are bugs and glitches. Bugs as in, not the crawly bugs, but performance glitches. And that can take you out of it a little bit, but also that jank is kind of fun sometimes. Like yesterday at the time of recording, we were playing.
Part of the charm.
Yeah, we were playing, and we had a couple robots get stuck in some rocks and they couldn't move, but they could still shoot us. And then we were calling in stratagems, and one is a big laser that locks on. Well, the laser locks onto the robots, but because they're in the rock, the laser is just shooting this rock for the entire time it's active and doesn't really do anything. And obviously that it's not effective, but it was funny. And again, it goes back to the game being fun.
Or how about that bug we had where you were trying to swim and you died, but you stimmed in the water, so you didn't really die, but you couldn't control it. So I had to run across the map and shoot him in the brain.
Yeah. I basically put myself in a cryo sleep that allowed me to not. I was between life and death, but I wouldn't respawn. So yeah, Joe had to come back and then free me from my eternal sleep, and I was able to come back. And there are some bugs that I do find annoying. Again, bugs and glitches. Like every time I've been playing recently, my loadout gets reset to like the default weapons, which is super annoying. Even though you can change it before you go out, it's like I don't know. It just bothers me. That's really the only major thing I feel like. And even then, they're doing little patches pretty frequently now. Now that they have the servers under control, because the game just blew up in popularity so quickly. Now they can actually work on refining it instead of just making it playable.
Yeah, that's definitely a frustrating one. I'm trying to get in the habit of resetting my loadout before I drop out. It resets your emotes too, so I go to hug you and puts up the little Helldiver salute. Totally. What the heck?
Yeah, I think something I'm really looking forward to, and we've already seen it with the addition of the bots, because when the game initially launched, it was just the bugs you were fighting. I'm excited to see where this game goes next. You know, what they add. We already saw that when they added the mechs, and that was a ton of fun, and now that's behind a stratagem you have to unlock, but it was almost like a free trial when it first came out. So I really think the folks behind this game have a really good grasp on what the fans want and what continues to make the game fun and different with gameplay elements. So I'm really excited to see, new planets. I don't know why. I was in bed last night thinking about it, and I was like, what if they add a jungle planet and there's like Venus flytraps that you have to fight, or like some sort of wildlife that is introduced or something like that, like a new environments, new enemy types. Like I really do see the potential here. And I think the folks over at Arrowhead do too, because of how popular the game is.
I didn't play Helldivers 1. I don't know about you, but I know there are other factions in that could come into play.
I played it very briefly because I think it was free. It was like one of the first PS Plus games that was free, I feel like. So I did play it a little bit. It was top down, and it was more of like a twin stick shooter. Definitely not this is like I don't know if you've ever heard of it. What was that game called? Risk of Rain, I think. It was a similar transition where the first game was like a 2D, almost like a Terraria kind of thing. And then the second game, they went full third person 3D shooter type, and it's like a big step up like that. And that's kind of what happened with Helldivers 2 here as well. And I think overall the production and the budget is significantly higher than the first game, and that definitely shows in a lot of the gameplay and that initial cutscene that looks like a deep fake. That like the guy, it's in the trailers too for the game. It's like that Uncanny Valley kind of video.
Yeah, which is another thing I think resets every time I do the game. Every time I load the game, like that cutscene you can skip.
I know that's great the first time though. It's very funny, and it sets the tone perfectly for the game. And like if you're on your ship, there's like their version of Old Spice ads that play. The humor is very well done. Every mission you go into, sometimes it's a helpful gameplay tip at the bottom of your screen. Other times it's like a total joke that is, like just there to make you laugh. And it's rare that a game makes me laugh anymore. By the way, I feel like Borderlands like completely killed my humor when it comes to games. Like nothing makes me laugh in video games, because that game was like so aggressive with its humor. But this game, I think pretty consistently is very funny.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any of those. What are they called? The bottom,
like the tips. Yeah. Well, there was the one we had yesterday where it was like the best way to demonstrate capitalism is to buy super credits, which is the real currency in the game. That's the premium currency.
Speaking of that premium currency, you can get that for free by playing the game.
That is true. That's a huge plus. Yeah. So the way they do your upgrades, they're basically like little battle passes, but there is a free one initially, and then you can earn the in-game currency to buy the premium battle pass, which gives you, some of the weapons are locked to that premium tier, and some of them are just modified version of guns you can unlock normally that are just stronger. But yeah, that is a huge plus. And again, it goes back to that it's a PvE game. You don't have to worry about it being straight up pay to win where, Timmy paid $100 and he just has the best blueprint for Call of Duty and he can just dominate me. You can earn the credits in the game and spend that on, whether that be armor or I think is it just armor in the shop for that currency? And then otherwise you buy the battle pass.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah.
So if you want to look like a Destiny character, you can do that, or you can buy the battle pass, get some weapons and armor in there too. I'm saving up to get the one just for the revolver.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I spent more money than I needed to when I bought it, as is my way. And I was able to get the revolver initially, and it was very cool. So But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about Helldivers 2. It's a ton of fun, especially if you've got friends to play with. Actually, that's a question for you, Joe. If you don't, say you can only play this game solo, would you recommend purchasing it?
That is a good question. I definitely would not have if not for you being like, oh, you got to play this game because it came out.
Because I have great taste.
Would in this hypothetical scenario, well, your great taste is just a shotgun spread.
It's like a buffet
of everything. Yeah, and but a buffet's not like gourmet. It's not like good taste. In this hypothetical scenario, are randos joining me?
Sure. Yeah, we can. I mean, I personally wouldn't use voice chat because I don't like to talk to strangers on the internet. But yeah, we can say you're talking to people.
Yeah, I would recommend it then. Maybe you can make a friend.
Why would I ever want to do that?
And the chaos ended from
yeah, honestly, I think that's a good point. It reminds me of when Among Us first came out, before all the children got a hold of it, and you would play Among Us with strangers, and you'd forge these relationships just in the moment.
Well, I love making little friends in games without talking to them, as you know.
Yeah, that's true. Joe is like the diplomat or the ambassador whenever we go online with anyone, and then maybe we'll have Kareem on at some point. Shout out Kareem. He's our other friend in the group. Kareem and I typically try to immediately destroy those relationships as quickly as possible for amusement.
Much to my dismay. But he's definitely off topic, and you can definitely cut it out if you want. But you're playing with in Apex, and Kareem and I started crouching at the last two enemies. Both took all our armor off. We were going to go fist it to cuff it out. Then boom, boom, wingman. Kareem, I got him.
Free win. I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's pretty indicative. A win's a win. All right, but that's everything I think we've got for Helldivers 2. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about Helldivers before we move on?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much touched on all the highlights of it.
All right, we're back on No Credits Rolled, talking with my pal Joe. I've mentioned my friends before in this podcast. Joe's one of them. We just got done talking about Helldivers 2, and now we're going to talk about another one of our favorite games from this year. Another game, just saying, my batting average, pretty great. Another game that I talked Joe into buying that he enjoyed, and that's Baldur's Gate 3. I've talked about it on shows before. I think I talked about it on this show. Baldur's Gate 3 is the best game ever, in my humble opinion. It easily, for me, was Game of the Year last year, and I think it's a truly revolutionary game. But Joe, what are your thoughts on it just off the top?
It really might be the best game of all time. As an avid D&D player, less avid nowadays, it definitely scratched that itch. I don't even know it was running for Game of the Year, but that was an easy slam dunk. I've only had one really solid playthrough. I'm giving it a little break before I get back in there. So sorry for your podcast namesake, but I have rolled credits.
That's okay. You're a guest.
Absolutely phenomenal. Every character has something about him that makes them interesting. Every spell looks cool, sounds cool. The story can go so many different ways. It's hard to even talk about the story because so many different things can happen.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it middle of the road kind of spoilers, nothing crazy. Maybe, nothing past Act 1, just in case, maybe this convinces someone to go buy it, which I do recommend if you even have a passing interest in RPGs and fantasy and D&D, in multi-layered narrative stories that can go multiple different directions. I highly recommend you check it out. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to go on sale anytime soon because it won a bajillion awards. But hey, go support Larian because it took them 10 years to make this game. So
the only reason I didn't play this game sooner was because Sam made me buy Diablo 4, which was mid at best.
Hey, we'll do a whole other episode on Diablo 4. We'll do a whole 5-minute episode on Diablo 4. Haven't touched that since we played it last. So
yeah, I don't think it's even installed anymore, which is such a shame for $70 or however much it was.
Yeah, we're not getting that money back. But hey, we do have a Patreon. And if you subscribe to the Patreon, I will give Joe his cut of Diablo if you give me $70. That's a promise right here live on No Credits Rolled.
Please.
But anyway, back to Baldur's Gate 3. I just did some quick notes here before the show because I wanted to have a little bit of an outline. It really it lets you explore things any way you want. And we talk about this a lot in games of, do my choices really matter, right? Is it going to end up being the same thing no matter what I do? And I think one of the ways that Baldur's Gate shines the most is in those choices where, in even like the most minor decision, the most minor side quest can come back later in the game. At a moment you are definitely not expecting. And it's those kind of things that makes it feel really special. It makes the world feel like it's constantly evolving and changing along with your character and your party.
The way everything can happen differently between playthroughs, like if a character happens to die or you don't run into them, you can miss out or gain stories and outcomes later that you wouldn't have ever known if you had done it the right, in quotes, right way.
Yeah, my dad, I think he said he's done 12 playthroughs now, and he still is like every time he does a new playthrough, he experiences something new. And I really think that there are very few other games like that where, and that's kind of why I haven't rolled credits on this yet, is because I know that I'm going to want to do more playthroughs. So it's like, well, I could just play this game till the end of time. So I'm not really in a rush, you know?
And it is such a like finality thing when you finish the game. Like there's no, like it's over. You don't see those NPCs anymore. You don't see your character anymore. The game ends, and that's something that a lot of games I feel like don't have anymore. Where after the game ends, you're just going to go back in the open world anyway, and you can go and do little side quests and stuff. But in this, like if you miss a side quest, you miss a side quest. You get it next time.
And that's another reason it's taking me so long to get through it, is because I'm like combing every inch of every map to make sure I don't miss anything. And I'm still missing things, and I don't know how to complete the quest. But at this point, I'm like, okay, well, we got to rush the story along. It reminds me a lot of Mass Effect, the Mass Effect trilogy, which I don't think you played those games.
No, I'm not familiar.
So the Mass Effect games, it's not the same gameplay. It's like a third-person shooter. But in terms of these three games build up these relationships with your party. And then in the third game, decisions you've made in the first game can alter the story. Now, it's not as open as Baldur's Gate 3. Like, I'm pretty sure Mass Effect, the trilogy still has like the same three endings no matter what you do. But it's that sense of the illusion of making a difference in Mass Effect's case, where your party and your allies come back at the end. Except Baldur's Gate 3 does that for real, because there's a lot more allies and there's a lot more ways you can make those allies to come in for the end of the game. Again, no spoilers, but it's pretty obvious that this is all building to something towards the end.
Oh, absolutely. I cannot wait for you to do that final fight so we can talk about that. We should do a whole episode. We could do a whole episode on
We'll do a spoilers
for Baldur's Gate and just talk about how our games were different, because I know just from talking about what we have done so far, we've gone to very different endings.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we'll do that as like a bonus episode if I finish this within a reasonable amount of time. Of course, we'll have to make a whole new show called Credits Rolled and redo all the branding, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway,
deals.
Another thing I want to hit is the voice acting in the game. It's incredible, at least in the main cast. Some of the NPCs are, they're NPCs, so what are you going to do? But now I know Neil Newborn, I believe is the guy's name. He got the nomination and he won the Game Award for Best Performance. Now, unfortunately, in my main playthrough, Asterion is not alive. So I didn't really get to experience Neil's performance. But my favorite character is Karlach, and her performance is spectacular. I should look up the actress's name. I should give these people the credit they deserve. But her performance is incredible. All of your companions are just the best. But yeah, Joe, who's your favorite companion?
Well, I feel like I'm outing myself a little bit. I really, really enjoyed Shadowheart's story. Every time I've gotten to play D&D in a tabletop sense, it's been years since I haven't been the forever DM, but I love clerics. I love playing as a cleric. I liked her that she was like not evil, but she was a cleric of one of the less. She's a cleric of Shar, which is like darkness, shadows, and secrets. Like they're not a good person, but that you find out why she's this follower. You find out you just get a lot of stuff for her character in Act 2 that I think really makes her shine as a character. You like go from liking her to hating her to then liking her again or
falling in
liking
love with her. Yeah.
Karlach again definitely shines though.
Yeah.
I hope you get the same ending for her as I did.
We'll see. You alluded that
But
my
that's
choices may
not
affect
likely.
that. Yeah. Really quickly, I have the cast list pulled up here. I totally mispronounced Neil's name. It's Neil Newbon, not Neil Newborn. Sorry. Jennifer English is Shadowheart. Devorah Wild is Lizelle. Theo Solomon is Will. Tim Downey is Gale. Samantha Bayard is Karlach. Matthew Mercer is in the game as a character that might be a spoiler, so I'm not going to reveal that. He's another one of the companions you meet, though. Tracy Wiles is Jaheira, who also does a really good job. In particular, I wanted to shout her out. And there's a bunch of other characters, but those are like the main. I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting somebody, but those are like a lot of the main cast that you meet. There's also famous people in the game. Did you know Jason Isaacs is one of the 3 villains from the second act? The one with black hair, whose name I don't want to say.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, and then of course J.K. Simmons is the first of those 3 that you meet, and he's great. That's
phenomenal.
Yeah, he's awesome. And it's kind of a shame he's not in the game more, honestly. But yeah, that's Jason Isaacs. How about that?
I do remember in your other episode where you mentioned that when you're talking about the Game Awards, you had said like, "Oh, I don't see how Neil Newbon could win the award." That's the only one you didn't like give Baldur's Gate the green light for.
Oh, really? Well, I was clearly wrong. You've heard it here first, folks.
Probably because you didn't have
the character that was nominated. Yeah. But yeah, that definitely was definitely wrong on my part. I also I remember because it was I don't remember the woman's name, but the woman from Alan Wake 2, which I hadn't played. I really only knew Yuri from Spider-Man, so I was just like showing my bias on my sleeve the whole time for that. But yeah, the voice acting is 10 out of 10. There's also a narrator who does a fantastic job. That's Amelia Tyler. And I believe she streams on Twitch as well, and she does like the narrator voice, or she was for a while with the game. But there's moments in the game where like the narrator voice will turn on you and isn't necessarily the narrator, but it's like your mind being manipulated, and she tweaks the performance there. It's very, very cool. So yeah, this is definitely a game you want to listen to. And speaking of listening to it as well, you want to listen to it for the music, which is also incredible. There's a reoccurring sort of motif, which is like the Down by the River song. And the way they remix that song and bring it back in subtle ways, in big ways throughout the game is really, really special. And it reminds me of like Halo, when like the main Halo theme, when that kicks in, it's like, all right, well, this defines this game. And I think that song as well in Baldur's Gate 3, it goes hand in hand with my memories of the game as well.
Yeah, you're definitely missing a lot of subtlety if you're playing this game with your headphones off and Netflix in the background and your kid crying.
Or if you're listening to a podcast like No Credits Rolled, you wouldn't want to distract yourself, but I will say you should turn off the podcast.
You wouldn't want to distract yourself from the podcast.
Well, yeah, pause the game, listen to the show, and then go play the game. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on the music real quick.
The podcast is a lot shorter.
Extra short this week, maybe. But yeah, no, I just wanted to touch on the music as well because that's also incredible. Essentially, every aspect of this game is incredible. I don't really think it misses in any regard. Now, for me personally, I do think I had maybe like the buggiest playthrough of this game ever. It's still bugs. I still find bugs all the time, where certain areas are just kind of busted. I've had big boss fights that are just kind of busted. I've had, multiple big boss fights now that just don't work. But again, I think that must be a me thing because I have not heard anybody else complain about that. I think I'm just unlucky.
Sounds about right. I didn't run into any bugs like that, and you had issues, all kinds of issues with Fallen Order or Star Wars Jedi Survivor too.
Yeah, Jedi Survivor was like a disaster on launch though, but I did have issues with God of War Ragnarok that nobody else had either. So I think it's because I got my PS5 from Kohl's. I just think it's cursed. Anyway, the music is great. The voice acting is incredible. All the characters are memorable, whether you like them or you hate them. Some of the companions are more likable than others, that's for sure. But yeah, it's not only one of the best RPGs I've ever played. I would say it's easily in my top 5 games of all time, maybe even my top 3 if I had to make a short list. What do you think?
100%. Definitely is so unique. It takes the lore of D&D, so it already has a background. It has a great story, no matter what way you take it. Every class feels different. Every race like having different dialogue depending on your race and your class. You got to pick that one. You're like, oh, I'm a paladin. I got to pick the paladin dialogue. It can give you advantages. It can give you disadvantage depending on the scenario. Playing as like a cleric or a paladin in Act 2, that's all I'll say. What made you feel just the ultimate power fantasy.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I can't even imagine that. Yeah, that's the other thing, too. You mentioned the class dialogue. I'm a sucker for that. Anytime what I've done in my character creator comes back in gameplay in that way, it's so sick. And even now, with my character being morally questionable, if a monk option comes up, I'm like, hey, man, just chill out, all right? Center yourself. It's fine. Even though I'm like, I've done horrible things.
Yeah, especially, I guess, when your character's actions in their class don't exactly align. And the easiest way to do that is with a monk for sure.
Yeah, the character creator is, I didn't write this down in the notes, but the character creator you could spend like hours in. I think if you really want to commit to it, it's one of the most impressive character creators I've seen, and especially if you're a D&D fan, because just scrolling over the different classes and there's like a little like demonstration animation for each class, right away you're like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. And you mentioned it earlier when you're casting spells or using abilities, the way they show the magic in particular, the way they translate D&D spells into gameplay is so cool if you're a D&D fan. Like there's Speak with Animals, where when you cast the spell, you like cast it on your own mouth and then you can talk to animals, or even just Firebolt or Ray of Frost. They say like Glacius and Ignis, and it's so cool. And it really never gets old. even however many hours I'm in, it still never gets old to cast that spell and to hear a character like do like their little power up before they fire it. Even if you're not a fan of turn-based RPGs, I would still recommend checking this game out, because I think the presentation really carries it, and I think it really makes it stand out from maybe another turn-based RPG you've played that didn't really hit for you.
And it differs from other turn-based RPGs, I think, just by you having 4 or plus characters to control, each in different initiatives. So you're not waiting 20 minutes for all the enemies to take their turn. You get a little chance to play in between.
Yeah, and it gives you a taste of the other classes too. I talked about this with my dad the other day, talking about why Karlach is my favorite character in the game. I liked her initially because in our Joe and I's main D&D campaign, I was a barbarian. So when I got the barbarian character to be able to play as, it was like, oh, this feels right. This is like, I probably should have picked this from the bat. But I was saving to make my D&D character for my playthrough with Joe, which we ended up doing. But getting that character, and then later on, if like say you start with a character, say your character isn't a magic user, but you end up getting the wizard and the sorceress and the warlock, you get the that gameplay flavor, and you can change it up as you go, which I think is a really good idea, because you're not just pigeonholed into your character, which a lot of other games tend to do, where even in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I was going to talk about, but we'll probably save that for next week, you can make your party leader Barrett, who has a gun, or Tifa, who's more melee based, but you're mainly playing as Cloud for a lot of that game. And they've added things where it lets you kind of branch off a little bit more. But with Baldur's Gate, I feel like each character feels so unique, and you can level them however you want too, which is the other cool thing. You can level them and you can swap out their spells or their abilities at will, and you can really make them tailored to how you want to play. And that includes picking subclasses, which can totally change the character as well. So I think it's just another element of the story that you play is however you want to make it. There are big plot beats that you're going to hit no matter what, but I think there's such a level of individual customization and choice that not a whole lot of other games do.
That's true. Gale, for example, one of my favorite characters, he might be my second or third. When you're designing his like wizard tree, you can, like, I picked him as a divination wizard, so he had portent rolls. You could change an enemy's hit to a 1 or an ally save to a 20, depending on what he rolled, and that could come in really clutch. Like, I've never played a wizard in D&D or in Baldur's Gate, so it was cool to have that experience to be like, oh, okay, I could totally have fun with this if I do another playthrough.
Oh yeah, that was another thing.
I don't get a bard. Would have been.
Yeah, that was weird, right? That is kind of strange. That's another thing I did want to hit, though, that I forgot to mention, is that I think Baldur's Gate makes the tabletop D&D a better game. I think it takes the mechanics of D&D and puts it in the game in so much of a more approachable way. You and I are big pen and paper fans when it comes to playing the tabletop D&D. But in Baldur's Gate, it puts all your skills and abilities on different wheels, like a GTA weapon wheel. And I think that makes it so much easier to understand. That, and combined with at the bottom of your screen, it shows you how many actions you have, how many bonus actions you have. If you have a special ability like a barbarian's, the amount of rages that you can do. It shows it all very clearly, and it makes it a lot easier to understand. And I think if you are hesitant to play the tabletop D&D, play Baldur's Gate first, and then you will have a huge advantage going into the tabletop version.
I was just going to say that, there are some differences in rules and classes and stuff, but the main gameplay of your actions, your having dialogue, your bonus actions, free action, and movement you can all keep track of is similar to tabletop. So it's kind of like a tutorial of sorts.
Yeah, and I think it makes you better at playing D&D too, because the biggest thing with D&D when you play the tabletop version is you get out of it what you put into it. And the more you think outside of the box and the more things you try in D&D. Now, obviously in Baldur's Gate, you are restricted because it is a video game. It's not just going to make up something on the fly, but it does give you a ton of freedom that lets you think outside the box in any given scenario, whether that be in dialogue or combat. And I think if you bring those skills that you develop throughout Baldur's Gate into the tabletop game, you're going to be a better player and you're going to be a better DM if you're crafting your stories and you're learning how these different threads can overlap and how to make interesting characters. I think there's a lot to learn as a DM and a player for D&D from just Baldur's Gate alone.
Definitely. There's times in the game where you're like, I wonder if this will work. And it totally does. Like, it'll never work in any other game. If you put a bomb down in a certain spot. Screw it. Let's give it a shot. And then it works perfectly. The only thing I think it lacks is every now and then there's a time where like, oh, why can't I just say this? This would fix everything.
Yep.
Why can't I just explain myself this way?
Yeah.
Instead of the set 4 or 5 dialogue options.
I think that that ability and that opportunity to try and just see what happens is a lot of the reason why my character has gone down the path he's gone down. Because anytime I'm tempted with a unconventional option or twist, I pretty much take it just because I want to see what happens. And that's another thing I want to mention. The save mechanic, 10 out of 10. It's like 2 buttons to quick save and you can try something. Because whether that be, you want to like toss a grenade into a group of guys or you want to say some off the wall stuff in dialogue, it's very easy to experiment. And it's easier to do that when you're by yourself because the game does have a multiplayer component, which we didn't even touch on. But when you're by yourself, you can, it's like having the time stone is how I described it. You can explore every possible option.
Because there are times in dialogue where if you pick the wrong option, usually it's pretty clearly the wrong option. And whoever you're talking to will just kill you outright.
Right. Or if you fail a check and it's like, well, now we have to fight.
Which is very D&D. Like, no takesies, like when the DM is sick to your crap and like, all right, no taking that back.
Yes, but now
power would kill.
You wield all the power, so you can do it. But yeah, again, I cannot recommend the game enough. If you have a passing interest in it, any aspect of it, please go check it out. And like I said, it does have multiplayer, so you can have your own D&D adventuring party. There is a little bit of jank involved with the multiplayer side of things, and it does kind of mess up the pacing if everyone's exploring everything at once. The game does its best to keep up, but I think the game really shines in a single player playthrough.
If you're playing multiplayer, definitely stick together if the best you can.
Yeah, do not split
just
the party.
So no one misses out on any dialogue or anything. Yeah, it's number 1 rule of D&D in general. 2 people is probably the best because you each get 2 or 4, because 2 people you each get a companion, you can still get their stories and stuff. But 3 people, you're missing. You get 1 companion, so you got to do like one thing at a time. Can slow things down, or especially if I like Shadowheart and you like Karlach, and we're both trying to get their respective stories, and we got to take turns, or I don't let you take a turn.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think that's going to wrap up everything we have today. Joe, is there anything else you wanted to talk about with Baldur's Gate 3?
I don't think so. Definitely looking forward to doing a Dark Urge playthrough, and I would love those golden dice from Honor Mode, but I don't know if I have that in me.
Oh yeah, Honor Mode is where you like can't. It's like permadeath, right?
Yes, there's no quick saving, no reloading saves.
That's so much pressure. I don't think I could do that personally.
Yeah, a lot of pressure, but you get golden dice.
The dice. We all love golden dice. Well, that's going to wrap things up for episode 5 of No Credits Rolled. Thanks so much to Joe, my pal, for coming on the show. Joe, did you have a good time?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we do it again soon.
It sure makes the time go by faster. I'll tell you what, it's tough to get up here and talk for however long I can by myself. I really enjoyed having a co-host today.
Anytime.
And thank you all at home for listening. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, you can always reach out to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. We will read them there. As we've demonstrated, there is a call-in line as well. You can call in and leave us a voicemail at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713. And we just might play it on the air unless your name is Joe, and then we probably won't. Make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. I believe we're there. We're even on Deezer, which I'd never heard of. There's also a Patreon you can check out if you're feeling generous. Every little bit helps. And yeah, that's going to do it for No Credits Rolled, episode 5. I'll see you next time.
No credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen. I'm your host today, and every day. How about that? Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the fine folks over at Philly Drinkers have partnered with the show to provide you with awesome Philadelphia sports merch for all your favorite teams. Make sure to use the link in the description to shop their collection, and every purchase you make helps out the show. Today's show is going to be a little bit shorter. I wasn't even going to do an episode this week, but there's just too many games to talk about, folks. So I decided to get on the mic and just give my thoughts on a couple of games that I've been playing lately. And that's pretty much what we're going to cover today. There's not going to be a whole lot of news. I did try to include a news story to go with each of these reviews, just to keep some element of the news in there. But it's mostly going to be reviews. It's going to be me yapping for however long I want to go, talking about 2 games that I've been playing in the last week or so. Also, before we get started, I want to remind everyone to go ahead and leave a like on the show, leave a review, leave 5 stars wherever you can, wherever you subscribe. Every little bit helps. Every little bit of traction we get helps the show get out there and to get more people listening. That's really what I appreciate. If you've been a listener since the beginning, I really appreciate you too. Anything you do to help support the show, whether it's listening or commenting or subscribing or liking, every little bit helps, and I appreciate each and every one of you. That's enough of me wasting your time. Let's get into the reviews. First game I want to talk about today is XDefiant. You might have seen it. It's kind of making the rounds. It's the new free-to-play shooter from Ubisoft. It is a arena-based shooter, and the story I have to go with it is that Ubisoft is working to fix XDefiant's busted hit registration, which I will talk about in a second. But first, just a general overview of the game. I've been describing this as the Ubisoft Cinematic Universe, even though it's not movies. It's just kind of like their version of the MCU. So it's a free-to-play first-person shooter developed by Ubisoft San Francisco, which is known for Rocksmith, which was the guitar teaching game that I tried to play and was really bad at. And also South Park, The Fractured But Whole. Now, for all, you don't have to cover your ears. It's 2 different words, Butwhole. It's 2 different words, folks. I don't want to get censored or anything. So they're known for those games, but now they're coming out with XDefiant. My friends and I are debating if it should be called Cross-Defiant or X-Defiant. I like X-Defiant, so we're going to go with that. This game combines the worlds of The Division, Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, Watch Dogs 2 specifically, and Far Cry 6 specifically into a first-person shooter. It's kind of funny when you hover over these different factions when you go to pick your characters. They're very clear about what games they're pulling from here. They get a little broad with things like Splinter Cell, but with Far Cry, it's definitely Far Cry 6, and it's definitely Watch Dogs 2, and they really want you to know that. And again, it is a first-person shooter. So basically what you're doing in this game, right, you're shooting, you're picking your faction. There are, 5 different factions. You don't have the Watch Dogs faction unlocked currently at the start. I believe you have to earn about 7,000 XP, which is a lot to unlock them. But each faction comes with their own abilities, their own perks, their own benefits, but the guns are shared in between each faction. So, for example, the Rainbow Six, they're not in the game yet, but they will be when the official first season starts. Currently, we're just in the preseason. But, for example, the Division class, you're kind of like these bad guy firefighters, so you deal incendiary damage as your passive ability when you shoot, and you have access to a flame drone that you can send out that blows up and lights everything on fire, or the alternate ability you can choose is sort of a Molotov that you throw at your feet and blow everything up. The Ghost Recon class, they have more health for some reason. The Far Cry class, they kind of passively heal when they're in a group because they're supposed to be like revolutionaries, and so on and so forth. So you're getting a little bit of that hero shooter aspect. Hero shooter, arena shooter, each one or the other. And you're kind of meshing these abilities. And currently in this preseason, there are really only objective-based modes. So there's like a payload mode, and there is a capture-the-point domination sort of mode. And I've been having a lot of fun with it. My friends and I have been playing it. I'm a sucker for any new free-to-play game that will come out that might be terrible. But I would say X-Defiant definitely isn't terrible. It definitely has its flaws in its current phase, but like I said, it is a preseason, and hopefully they're going to work out a lot of these kinks once the full thing releases in Season 1. I definitely think the game has a lot of potential. With that backing of Ubisoft, if they really want to do this, if they really want to commit to this game being their free-to-play shooter, their free-to-play arena shooter that they're going to update and add things like cosmetics to, their live service. We've talked about live service games on this show before. If this is how Ubisoft is going to really try to, compete with things like Call of Duty, then I think it's a good start. It's definitely a good start, but there are things they need to work on. So the gameplay is very fast-paced, right? The time to kill is pretty short. There have been matches where I'm spawning and dying instantly because of poor spawns, which I'll get to in a second. The majority of the game modes, like I said, are objective-based. There is no straight TDM or anything like that, but I'm guessing those will probably be added once that first season fully launches. In terms of the guns are a little iffy, right? The guns feel a little, I would say they feel a little cheap. I'd say they feel okay overall. With some of the ones I've unlocked definitely feeling better than others. The LMGs are my favorite weapon so far, but in any kind of first-person shooter, I tend to gravitate towards the LMG. It's just my preferred weapon in most games. So that's what I started using when I first started playing this game, because I found the assault rifles and the SMGs they just don't do enough damage, in my opinion, at least the ones you start with. But the LMGs, I think, are pretty consistently good. They do enough damage, they pack enough punch, and right now I'm using the second one I've unlocked is the RPK, and it's pretty great. I know there are people that play on PC that like the SMGs because they can get those headshots. I'm just not that good, so I'm going with the LMG. No, I'm no shooter expert by any means. I want to make that clear. I always try to give these kind of caveats whenever I talk about games like this. I'm not the expert. I've played a lot of shooters. One of the first games I played when I first touched a controller was Halo, but I don't know like the pro strats and things like that. I just like to play these kind of games. So take what I say with a grain of salt. As far as the maps go, I think it's one of the standouts of the game. I really like the map design. There's one map in particular that I think is really cool, the Coney Island map. It's like, Coney Island, like a big carnival. But it's a payload map in that instance. And there's a lot of different phases to it where you're going through like a big haunted house or there's like a pirate section, there's like a Egypt section. It's really neat. And it kind of reminds me of Overwatch, where those maps have so much character and life to them, and there's so many things you can pick out and notice. And I think a lot of these maps do that as well in X-Defiant. And they're also from Ubisoft games. They're taken from various locations from the different games that are represented in the factions. So a lot of them are from The Division, because The Division takes place in New York and Washington, D.C., so they can just take, any section of it and call it a map. I think visually it looks pretty great. Graphically, it's pretty great. It's a very bright game. I don't know the right term for that, maybe saturation or something, but the colors really pop, I think. And those Division maps, for me, are most recognizable from the little bit I've played of The Division. It's a very specific audience to cater to, but I found it neat. I'm like, oh, hey, this looks like The Division, and it's cool to see those things in first person versus in the Division, you're usually in third person. So seeing these kind of similar map designs from that game in this new environment is pretty neat, I think. And, I'm easy to please when it comes to things like that. So like I've been saying throughout this review, the game is still in its early phases, and there's a lot of issues that will probably be fixed with patches. Like I said at the top of this story, Ubisoft is working on the hit detection in particular. And yeah, the hit registration is pretty bad. You get killed around corners almost constantly. It's definitely my biggest gripe with the game. You feel like you're in cover, you feel like you're behind a wall or behind some piece of cover, and you still die. I mean, there have been times where I round the corner, I turn around, and I see the bullets that are hitting me just clipping right through the wall. Not because of bullet penetration, but literally because of the hit detection and how the bullets are coming at me. It's extremely frustrating, I'll be honest. And it's also when you're shooting an enemy. There is a quote here from, a quote from our most reputable sources here on the internet, a user by the name of bloody_psycho666. I'm sure they are the premier journalists when it comes to these things. But they said, quote, the M16 feels like I'm shooting hopes and dreams at the enemies, which, as someone that likes to unlock the M16 in any of these shooters, I feel so vindicated seeing that quote, because just yesterday at the time of recording, I had unlocked the M16 and I was using it with my pal Joe, who's been on the show. And there were so many instances where I'm pointing directly at the enemy firing and my bullets are just not hitting them. It feels like I'm every third burst I fire is just not real. So to see that gun get specifically called out makes a lot of sense and definitely would explain my issues. But aside from just that, there's a Redditor who, again, we're going for the best sources here, primary sources if you've gone to journalism school. Redditor's always a primary source. His name is Chucked Bank for Bo. Called the hit registration, quote, the worst I've seen in a long time. He says, I'm surviving way longer running and jumping around bullets than I would in any other games, cause, that's C-U-Z, their shots just won't connect. And then he ends with, lol, LOL. So some hard-hitting commentary from Chuck there. But it's true. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but it is true. When your whole game is a first-person shooter, these are the kind of things you have to nail, or people aren't going to want to play it, because it's the one thing you're doing is shooting. So if that doesn't feel great, if that doesn't feel responsive or accurate, it's going to turn a lot of people off. And it's definitely one of the barriers that my friends and I are dealing with now, is dealing with that kind of technical side of it that, is already kind of impeding our ability to enjoy the game. And that's not to even mention, the people that are extremely sweaty on PC, bunny hopping around corners, sliding, doing insane stuff that you can only do on PC. That combined with the hit detection issues, there are some matches where you're just completely outmatched by both the game itself and by the people that are just objectively better than you. But it is what it is. And another thing, while I'm complaining, I might as well pile it on. The spawn system is pretty tough, right? The spawns can suck sometimes. I've literally spawned on top of enemy players only to instantly die because they're right behind me with a gun to my head. And there's nothing you can really do in that situation. And I've really noticed it in the domination modes where the points might flip, so the spawns flip as well if people are capturing certain areas. There's also a mode, I guess you could call it King of the Hill. I'm blanking on what the name would be, but it's where the point essentially moves around the map and you stand on it to get the points, and then it times out and a new one spawns and you go there. There were matches that I've done where the point spawns where the enemies are spawning and they just keep it, and then they do that over and over again, and you can't even get a chance to get in there and fight for it because the enemies, you're killing the enemies and they're respawning right where the objective is. So that stuff kind of sucks, and it makes it hard to just kind of have fun in the game, honestly. You do get that dopamine hit, which I love in games like this, where you get a lot of rewards popping up on screen when you're getting these kills. For example, like multi-kills. There is a healing aspect to the game where you can get rewarded for healing teammates, which I enjoy. And, I think the feedback when you do get a kill is pretty satisfying. Enemies do have health bars and things like that you can chip away at, which some people don't really like. I don't really mind it. But I think when you do get those kills, when you do pop off with a multi-kill, I do think it is satisfying. One thing I've pointed out to my friends, there's no music, I don't think, unless I am missing some sort of setting. There's no music during the match. There are sound effects. There are obviously the in-game sound effects, and there are sound effects for respawning and things like that. But there's no music, and I think it's really noticeable. It's really noticeable how quiet it can get without some kind of music. And I'm not asking for music the entire time, but maybe some punctuating music if you're maybe halfway through a match or something. My friends and I have been playing a ton of Rainbow Six Siege, and there is music in that game. Right when a match is about to end, the music will kind of swell and sort of, raise the tension and make it very dramatic. So I think little touches like that would really help too, and sort of flesh out the soundscape of the game. But overall, if you like COD, I would check it out. It's very much like COD. It does feel cheaper than COD. That's the best way I can describe it. It feels a little bit lower budget, a little bit less AAA. and a little bit more cartoony. And I don't mean cartoony as in Overwatch. I mean cartoony in like a COD Mobile kind of way. And that sounds bad, but it's not quite that level of like a mobile game. But you know what I mean if you go play it and you compare it to those kind of games. I would definitely check it out if you do enjoy the COD multiplayer, though, especially if you liked Black Ops 3 and 4, because we are working in those arena shooter, hero shooter aspects with the different factions having different abilities, and there being a little bit of synchronization with those abilities if you want to do that. Most people don't. They just want to shoot and turn their brain off. But there is a little bit of potential there for team play. There is a ranked mode. Joe and I did a match of that and got absolutely dominated. But maybe in that mode, it's a 4v4 currently in this. They're doing like a trial run of the ranked mode. But maybe, there's potential there too if you really want to put some time into it. Now, the final thing I want to talk about here with talking about XDefiant is I'm wondering what the staying power of this game will be with my friends and I, because we were a big fan of the finals when it came out. I don't think I ever talked about the finals on this show, but it was another free-to-play shooter, 3v3v3v3, I think. I'm not just a skipping record there. It was a team-based thing with teams of 3. There was some variation depending on the mode you played, but my friends and I were very much into that game for a while. And then eventually it just kind of got stale, right? We just kind of stopped playing it because there wasn't enough new content. The gameplay loop kind of got stale. People were just better than us and were just dominate, especially if they're on PC, because we are on console. And eventually it just kind of faded away. And I'm wondering if that same thing will happen with XDefiant. It kind of needs that sauce to make it stand out and to make us want to come back to it over and over again. Now, it might be something that I personally stick with, that I play on my own and level up, I got to get the battle pass, got to swipe the card, already did. You know how it is. Support the Patreon, by the way. But in terms of something that my friends and I play together, I'm curious if it will have that staying power either in this preseason or when that full release happens, if they're going to be bringing the content, bringing the maybe weapons or new maps or new factions that get us back in and say, hey, you know what? Let's put Siege on the back burner for today. Let's boot up XDefiant, do a couple rounds, and, kind of have a good time. Only time will tell, folks. And again, it's interesting seeing this with the backing of Ubisoft, right? That budget, the IPs that Ubisoft have. I'm not saying like The Division is like a COD killer or anything, but it is cool seeing these different IPs utilized in one game. And I think there's a lot of potential there, right? I mean, Ubisoft, you've still got Assassin's Creed, you've still got Rainbow Six, which I believe is coming in that first season. Will we see the Rabbids? Will we see the Rabbids in XDefiant? Boy, I hope so. But yeah, only time will tell. But anyway, that's my thoughts on XDefiant. We're going to take a quick little break, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about my second game today, Starfield. You're listening to No Credits Rolled. And we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done talking about XDefiant, and now I want to cover Starfield. Now, I have talked a lot of smack on this game, and this is sort of my moment to sort of make my peace with that, to apologize to all you Starfield fans out there, because with this new update that Bethesda released for their sci-fi RPG, Starfield is officially back in my gaming rotation. When I've got some free time to myself, this is one of the games that I am turning to boot up, just to exist in this world. And I've done reviews now on Fallout 76 and Fallout New Vegas, so I'm definitely in that Bethesda mood, that I have that Bethesda itch. And Starfield is really starting to satisfy that in terms of being a modern Bethesda game that I am invested in. And this is all because of the recent update. It dropped in May, probably 2 weeks ago at the time of recording. Now, the headline I have here is that Starfield's May update causes head-scratching new problems, which, hey, if that doesn't sound like Bethesda, I don't know what is. We covered, an episode or 2 episodes ago when they did that Fallout 4 update, and it completely demolished one of the mods, the biggest mods that were coming out for the game. So, Bethesda is maybe fixing things with a hammer instead of maybe a finer tool that needs to be done. But hey, it got me back in. But yeah, I've talked a lot of trash on this game, and it definitely has its hooks in me now. The biggest thing, honestly, for me, and you can bash me in the comments if you want for this, but the frame rate update really is helping me get back into this game. I am such a sucker, or a stickler, I should say, for that 60, at least 60 frames. I feel like there's no excuse at this point. Everything should be 60 frames, and this update is able to do that. The game can now run 60 frames. I think you're able to choose 40 if you want to go for visuals, or 60 if you want to do full performance. And it's fairly consistent. I'd say like 80% of the time it is consistently holding 60 frames a second. That being said, when I booted it up for the first time and went back into one of my side quests, and I was like, wow, look how good this looks. Immediately in that side quest, there were massive frame drops. I mean, we're talking down into the 20 frames a second probably, maybe even lower. So that was disappointing. And you do get those frame drops maybe in large city areas when you're first landing or walking in, rather. If there's a lot of effects and things going on screen, if there's a lot of enemies on screen, you do still get those frame drops. But most of the time it is holding 60, which is great. And the game looks fantastic. When it is running at full speed and no issues, the game is really stunning looking. In particular, I think the character models and dialogue can look amazing. There are some characters that look better than others, and sometimes it can border just a little bit on that uncanny valley. But, I mean, when it hits, it looks great. There's one character in particular, I'm blanking on his name. I'm going to talk about him more later, but he's like the old guy in your team. He sort of is he's like a billionaire that's sort of funding your project. He's, the eccentric billionaire character that you've seen in other things, but his facial capture looks great. Like, there was a moment where I was talking to him and he wrapped up a piece of dialogue, and on the last word he said, his eyebrows like scrunched up in a way that a real human's eyebrows would, that you wouldn't even notice in, the real world, because people have all sorts of facial tics. But to see that in the game and to see that reflected in the performance capture was like, it kind of like blew my mind. It looked so realistic that it looked like I was, it looked like a real person. Now, that uncanny valley does kind of come in, especially with eyes. I think the eyes look a little weird at times, or the tracking for where NPCs are looking when you're talking to them. A little strange there, but I think overall this is a huge improvement, especially coming off of things like New Vegas and 76. It's tough to even compare because of the difference. And I think if this is the path that Bethesda goes forward with, we're going to see some crazy stuff with this tech or whatever they're using to make these facial captures look as good as they do. So my whole reason for getting back into this game, and part of the reason I wanted to even do this podcast, was because of one particular side quest I did recently that by the time I finished it, I basically said, okay, look, I am fully back in. This game has its hooks in me. I want to keep playing. I'm excited to see where this goes. So I just want to tell the quick story about it. So it was that character I mentioned before, the rich guy, and I'm going to look him up. His name's Walter Stroud, everybody. Walter Stroud. So Walter comes to you and he says, hey, I want to buy this artifact off this dealer, but it's on this planet that is known for its shady dealings. It's like any shady planet you've seen in Star Wars is essentially what we're dealing with here. So Walter comes to you, he says, I want to buy this artifact, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get screwed over somehow. I just essentially want to use you as hired muscle. So, my guy, I'm kind of playing him as like a cowboy type. I'm sort of trying to be, not necessarily morally gray, definitely leaning more towards morally good, sort of, but, I'm willing to bend the rules if I need to at times, right? So Walter says I need some hired muscle. I say, okay, sure, because he's, I'm part of this group. I think they're called the Collective, maybe. They're like your little team. So Walter's part of the team. He's bankrolling the whole team. So I say, okay, let's go. So we go to this planet, and he says, when you get there, he says, all right, go case where we're doing the deal, which is this like big club where they sell this like special drug that you can only get at the club. And if you try to leave with that drug, if you try to leave the planet with that drug, you can get arrested but it's legal in this city. So there's already cool sci-fi stuff going on. So I go to the club, and it reminds me a lot of Mass Effect, the clubs in that game, space clubs. You've probably seen them. Lots of bright colors, lots of bass music. But the colors in this club are really striking. It's like a lot of pinks and blues and purples, and it's a contrast to what's outside, because outside it looks like Coruscant from Star Wars. Lots of oranges and browns and still neon advertisements, but definitely a stark contrast. So we get in the club, And I go and I talk to the bartender and I say, hey, we're looking to do this deal here. Is there anything I should know? And you're able to do a persuasion check with him where you can sort of get the guards on your side. If anything goes wrong, I'm able to go upstairs once I get the guards on my side because I'm able to access the VIP lounge, and I find the security controls and I'm able to hack the door so that in the room where we're having the meeting, I can close the door whenever I want, assuming we need to trap the guy in there. So I do both those things. I cover both those bases, and I go back to Walter and I say, hey, all right, let's do this. So he says, okay, you got to wait and you got to find the guy with the package because we don't know who he is, but he's going to have this big briefcase. So I sit in the club and I wait and I see everybody walking around until I find the NPC with the giant briefcase. Turns out it wasn't, I was kind of overthinking it. I was sitting watching the crowd, watching people walk in and out. Turns out the guy was there the whole time up against the wall with a briefcase, so whatever. My bad. So anyway, I find the guy, and there's like a code phrase you have to say, which they do give you the wrong dialogue. I don't know what happens if you click that, but I say the right code phrase, and he's like, all right, let's do this. I go back, I get Walter, we go up in the meeting room, and the guy, before we go up there, Walter says, he's like, hey, look, this guy's probably going to ask for double because he's some, low rent guy in this company that doesn't really care. He just wants to get his money and get out. Sure enough, the meeting starts and the guy does just that. So the whole time during this meeting, you can close the door or you can pull your gun and just start blasting. But I sort of follow Walter's lead because he tells you, he says, look, let's try to avoid bloodshed if we can. So I'm like, okay, Walter, let's give that a shot. And we end up doing the dialogue with the guy. We talk him down. Walter essentially has infinite money, so that's a fun bargaining chip because you can just give him whatever you want. And I end up avoiding bloodshed with this guy. And I get the artifact and Walter pays him and the guy leaves. So you walk outside, and all of a sudden you're held at gunpoint by all these guards. And the guards are like, hey, we're from this other company that's competing with Walter's company. And they're like, hey, that's our artifact. And then you're like, okay, well, I guess that's where that guy stole the artifact from. He worked for this competing company, stole it, and is trying to sell it to Walter's company. And because I had the guards on my side from casing the joint before, I was able to sort of have the guards come over and say, hey, this guy's accosting me. Let's, can you break this up? And they're like, okay. The guards back down, but they say, you're not getting off this planet with that artifact. They end up impounding my ship. So Walter and I are now stuck on the planet. And he says, look, Walter says, I know who's doing this. It's this corporate rival that works for this other company. We got to break into his office to stop, get our ship freed to lift the impounding. So I'm like, all right. So we walk over to the other guy's office. We go to the front desk, and I fail the persuasion check to try to just let me in, right, to go talk to the CEO, which, understandable. If you walk into Apple headquarters and ask to talk to Tim Cook or whoever's in charge, they're probably not going to let you in. So then Walter says, well, okay, we can find another way in. That involves sneaking. Now, as we're sneaking, Walter's wife appears. I forgot to mention this. Walter's wife is the other co-owner of his company. And she gets on the comms and she's like, all right, well, here's how you can sneak in. It involves crawling up the side of the building through elevator shafts, in ventilation ducts. It becomes like a Mission Impossible corporate espionage spy thing for a second. And I end up getting to the exterior of the building. I end up taking out the guards and getting all the way to this guy's office. And then, you walk in, and of course the guy's expecting you, right? Of course the guy's got guards ready, waiting for you. And he says, all right, you're going to give me the artifact, and then we're just going to kill you. However, Walter, because he has infinite money, proposes that he just absorbs this guy's company and makes it part of his company and allows this guy to just profit endlessly, essentially. And again, at any point, you can start blasting and killing everyone. But I'm able to talk this guy off the ledge with Walter's help to have that guy join the company. And the guy's like, all right, well, fine, because, money solves all problems, as you know. And he says, okay, one last thing. We actually caught that guy from the beginning that sold you the artifact, and he's currently bleeding out my office because we shot him and took him prisoner. But if you want to wrap this up, I want you to deal with him. You as in the player character, me. So I walk into this guy's office, and sure enough, the guy's there bleeding on the table. And Walter's like, look, let's go easy on this guy. He's just a cog in the machine. He didn't mean to inflict any harm. And again, I'm deferring to Walter because by this point, Walter's kind of won me over. And so I go and talk to the guy, and he's like, hey, look, please don't kill me, essentially. And I say, okay, look, we're going to let you go. But you can't speak any of this ever again. And the guy says, all right, fine, sure. And that's how it ends. And the guy ends up going free. We get the artifact. That Walter ends up buying that guy's company, and we all live happily ever after. And it was just such a cool quest line of twists and turns and of different environments and there's always this thing where if you peel back the layers or you look at behind the curtains, you can see that this outcome probably would have happened no matter what, right? I probably would have ended up in this guy's office no matter what, talking to him, blah, 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 blah. But it was enough of an illusion for me that I really felt it. I felt like my choices mattered, and I felt like this path that I took fit how I was playing my character. It fit the world. It fit the character of Walter, who I'm sort of learning now because he's part of my team. And like I said, the different elements of it, of the corporate espionage to a little bit of combat, to the dialogue, to the choosing in the beginning to case the club and get those extra benefits, it all felt so great. And it all kind of wrapped up in a neat little bow of being able to let this courier guy go at the end and, show that mercy and to have it all tie back into the beginning of the mission when we met him in the first place. And it was that quest that made me be like, okay, this is really interesting and I'm very much into this. And that was kind of what got its hooks in me. And I was like, all right, we're going to keep doing this. Anyway, that was a very long-winded story, but if those kind of quests interest you, or if you like those Bethesda things where you take a side quest and it ends up, 2 hours of fun you never thought you'd have, then, Starfield definitely has those kind of quests waiting for you. But anyway, during the marketing, I think they described the design of the ships and things like that as NASA punk, which was kind of cringy at the time. But I really do notice that, especially in the base ship that you have, because I don't really care about upgrading my ship or changing it, because there is a pretty robust ship design mechanic. But I'm not really touching any of that. There's a lot of wires and switches and things, lots of analog tech that your ship uses and that exists in the world. I mean, most of the guns that I have currently are still, firearms, regular, they shoot bullets. There are laser guns and stuff, but it's not like super far future where sci-fi is bordering on fantasy where, technology is like magic. There are still those real world tangible things that you can connect with that, you're like, okay, I can see how humanity evolved to this point with where we are in our world now and where Starfield is taking place. And like, for example, this is something that like, it really scratches a good itch for me that I don't know if people even care about. But when you go to do a grav warp, which is like light speed in this universe, your guy like brings out a panel in the ship and like flips a bunch of switches and turns a dial, and then the grav warp happens. And it's like, even that little touch of doing that in first person, it really helps with the immersion aspect of the game. And there's a lot of little touches like that really help you get immersed in the world and make you feel like you're really, this spacefaring cowboy or whatever you want to be. And I really enjoy stuff like that. I also recently did a mission where I got space powers, which didn't see that coming. I guess it's earlier in the game, but I never really did the main side quest when I tried to play the game initially. But you go to these temples and you find these artifacts, and each artifact you find gives you this unique space power. And it's kind of like the voice quest in Skyrim, where you're going around and getting different shouts and things like that. And you even activate them the same way by hitting the bumpers. But that's a whole other aspect of the game that I'm like, wow, I did not see this coming, and now I have superpowers. And it ties in the main quest, too, because you're discovering these artifacts for your group. And it's like, I just keep finding these little surprises, and I'm like, wow, this isn't as bad as I initially thought. I was so wrapped up when the game came out. I was so wrapped up in its poor performance and sort of barren planets and menus and things like that. And don't get me wrong, pretty much all that stuff is still there except for the performance, except for the frame drops. But the barren planets are still an issue. The menus are still a problem. I was going to get to that in a second, but I wanted to keep raining praise. But I'm able to. I just think there was a lot of hype for this game, a lot of pressure put on this game, and I think that was part of why I was so critical on it, because at the time, it was sort of the make or break game for Xbox, right? Because of where they were at the time. And so there was a ton of pressure put on this, especially for it being a Bethesda game, an Xbox exclusive, all that stuff. And I think that was kind of why our expectations got so high. But now coming off of Fallout 76, Fallout New Vegas, and sort of recalibrating my gamer brain to how Bethesda games work, I think Starfield makes a lot more sense to me now. My expectations are a little bit more metered. They're a little bit more baseline going into this game. And it's making me have a lot more fun than I ever did before. Now, there are still negatives. The that I would like to touch on, because I don't want to just rain praise with, without any downside. The gunplay is still rough. Bethesda's never really been great at that. It's certainly better than New Vegas, but it's a little bit closer to Fallout 4 in terms of how it feels. You do have like a jetpack that you can boost around, but it's not, I don't really think the game utilizes that movement system to its full potential. You're still just using whatever gun you have the most ammo for, shooting people over and over again until they die. Now, that being said, now that I've got the space powers, maybe as I work those in to the gameplay, maybe that will disrupt the gunplay a little bit more, because the first one is an anti-gravity field you can create. So maybe I can lift up enemies and take them out that way, and that will spice things up. There's definitely a lot more for me to see in this game because there are a lot more of these powers to unlock. But the gunplay is still a little bit rough. There's still a ridiculous amount of menus. There are so many quests that I've done where you go and you hover over the quest objective and you can set a course and you can basically fast travel to wherever you need to go right then and there. But sometimes it's in a system where you need to jump to one system. It's like a connecting flight is what it feels like. You have to jump to one system and then make another jump to refuel to get to where you need to go. So we're talking like 4 to 5 menus sometimes just to get to your one objective, just to talk to somebody and then have to turn around and go all the way back to where you just were to hand in the quest. It's a bit much. I mean, the load times are short, which is nice, but it's like, I just feel like there had to have been a better way to streamline this where I don't have to sit in so many menus and I don't have to just repeatedly fast travel until I get to where I need to go. And yeah, a lot of the planets are still pretty barren. There's kind of no getting around that. That's still an issue. But when you're in these big hub areas where these quests are, intertwining with the world, that stuff still stands out, I think, quite a bit. And other than the frame drops, there hasn't been anything major that is making me want to turn the game off. In fact, I really have an urge to play this game a lot of the time, which was surprising for me. But yeah, the game is still far from perfect. It's nice to find some enjoyment in this game. I previously called it a dumpster fire, I believe. I don't know if I did that on content, but definitely to my friends, I definitely called it a dumpster fire. But, Starfield is back. It's in my rotation, and, I'm happy to see it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Starfield. Let me know if you are getting back into it, if you've given it a shot since the big update, or if you fell off in September when it came out and never really got back into it. I definitely think it's worth getting back into it and giving it a shot if you did fall off. But that is going to wrap up episode 9 of No Credits Rolled. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Remember, you can always email questions or comments to nocreditsrolled@gmail.com. You can call in and leave us a voicemail at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713. And we might just play it on the air. Hey, if you want to call in and complain about Starfield, feel free. Of course, make sure to subscribe to No Credits Rolled on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast, we will be there for you. Leave a review, leave a like, leave a comment. Anything like that helps get the show into more people's ears. Also, we are on TikTok at No Credits Rolled. We are also on YouTube Shorts at No Credits Rolled. You can follow us there. I've been trying to get more into TikTok. I really enjoy posting on there and editing videos for that. So I'll do a little quick segment from the full show up on TikTok, and sometimes I'll do additional content there as well. So go follow us at No Credits Rolled on TikTok. There's also a Patreon you can subscribe to as well. Can't leave that out. Oh, I also want to tease next week's episode. Next week, I will be reviewing the Paper Mario 1,000 Year Door remake that just dropped on Switch. I just got that installed the other day, so I will be talking about that next week for review. So make sure to tune in if you want to hear my thoughts on Paper Mario. And with that, I will see you next time on No Credits Rolled.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
No credits rolled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of No Credits Rolled. My name is Sam Whalen, and today I'm going to be covering a smattering of news stories, my thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2, and maybe a few bonus games. But before we get into that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. That includes Spotify, Apple, and now YouTube as well. You can look us up, No Credits Rolled, wherever you get those services. Also, if you're on Deezer, I would like to keep plugging Deezer because I think it's funny. But if all my Deez heads out there, please leave a comment. Let me know if you're listening on Deezer. If you're feeling generous, the show also has a Patreon. You can just search No Credits Rolled on there as well. Every little bit helps. This is a semi-independent operation, which I guess really doesn't make any sense if you think about the word semi-independent. We've also got a call-in line, and I want to hear from you. Call in at 856-209-0713. That's 856-209-0713. And let me know what you're playing and what I should be playing and what I should be talking about. All right, I think I got everything off the top. Let's get into our first story. The headline reads, 60% of playtime in 2023 went to 6-year-old or older games, new data shows. This comes from Kotaku, as well as a research firm called Newzoo. The story is from Zach Zuizen, I think that's right. Zach, if you're listening to this, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But he says, quote, Newzoo's data shows that just 66 titles accounted for 80% of all playtime in 2023. And 60% of that playtime was spent in games that are 6 years or older. In fact, in 2023, 5 old games, Fortnite, Roblox, League of Legends, Minecraft, and GTA 5 accounted for 27% of all playtime in the year. That's about a quarter for all you math heads out there. Of the 23% of playtime spent in 2023 on new games, which are defined, new here as being defined as 2 years or younger, more than half was spent in big annual sequels like the latest Madden or NBA game. And this last part is what really made me want to talk about this on the show. Zach says, quote, only 8% of video game playtime was spent on new, non-annual titles like Diablo 4 and Baldur's Gate 3. 8% on new games. And again, for the purposes of this research, new is being classified as 2 years or younger, which isn't even really new if you think about it, at least by my standards. But 8% of playtime spent on these new games. So what do we do with that data, right? What does that data make you think of? For me, it shows how difficult it is for new games to break out and remain relevant. Especially when you're dealing with these juggernauts like a Fortnite, a Roblox, League of Legends, Minecraft, GTA 5. All of these games, by the way, are 10 plus years old. Crazy to think about that they're still this dominant. I think this is a trend with lots of different kinds of media today. You see it a lot in movies, this trend of sequels and remakes and requels that sort of dominate what people go and see and what people like to see, and in this case, what people like to play. I think there's the familiarity of it. I think that's the biggest thing. People are much more likely to dive into something that they already know or something based off something they know instead of just going headlong into a new property or a new experience that they might not be as familiar with. So how can new games compete when established titans like Fortnite take up so much of the player base? It's tough, right? I mean, I'm not a game developer, but I imagine it's got to be extremely tough if you're making a new game and you're gunning for that 8% of the player base. You know, that's a very small margin of the player base, and there's a lot of new games that come out every year. And again, for this research, new is 2 years or younger, so we're going back to 2022. Had to look at the calendar because I did not know the year, but you know that's not that new going back 2 years, and they're still fighting over this 8% of the player base. Now, there are some exceptions, like the article cited, like Baldur's Gate 3. And what makes something like a Baldur's Gate 3 break out and capture so many gamers, right? What makes it such a presence in the public discussion that allows it to kind of defy this data and kind of have its own voice and its own moment in the gaming space? In my opinion, I think a lot of this comes down to what kind of gamer you are. And I know it's kind of cringe to use the word gamer, but I'm gonna. I think a lot of people are very casual gamers, and I don't mean that as an insult. I think a lot of people just, you know, they work their 9 to 5 and they come home and they hop on Fortnite or they hop on Warzone and you know, get destroyed by a 13-year-old and then call it a day. But, you know, those kids too, those 13-year-olds, they might just only play Fortnite, right? They might only play Roblox. They might only play Warzone, and they don't really branch out a whole lot. And I think for those kind of gamers, that's why your Fortnites, your Roblox, your League of Legends, your Minecrafts, your GTA 5s remain so popular, because there's constant updates to these games. There's a built-in constant player base, as we can clearly see here. And for most of these, excluding, you know, Minecraft and a GTA 5, you can hop on, you can do a match, and your time with the game can stop there. Now, that's not counting, you know, in Fortnite and Roblox, there's like games within games, and in Minecraft as well. We're not counting that. I mean like the core of what the game is. League of Legends matches are a lot longer than that. But my point is you can do whatever you do in your day-to-day life, hop into these games, get your fix of the game, and then kind of go back to your regular life. And I think that there are a lot of casual gamers that is what they're doing. It's not, you know, they're not looking for the next groundbreaking single player RPG, and that's okay. You know, that doesn't have to appeal to everybody. But I think that the large amount of the player base for your Fortnites is this casual audience, and it's what these Titan games kind of rely on to keep the lights on. Now, this brings us back to a Baldur's Gate 3 and what makes a game like that appeal to a more casual gamer. I think a lot of it comes down to word of mouth. Right, we're seeing that with Helldivers 2 right now as well. TikTok, Instagram, social media in general, you're seeing these clips of these games, and you get the feeling of FOMO, right? The feeling of missing out. You say, oh, well, this looks like a ton of fun. Look at all these fun clips I'm seeing. I want to go play this game. I want to branch out and try something new that I might not, you know, that might not appeal to me just on the cover art alone or the trailer for the game alone. If I'm a casual gamer and I'm seeing that this game is extremely popular, it might entice me to want to go over and give it a shot. And then maybe I'll stick with it if it's a Baldur's Gate and I get wrapped up in the story or the characters. Or if it's a Helldivers 2, I get stuck in the gameplay and that loop of doing missions and, you know, I'm hooked, and there's your 8% that are playing new games. I think accessibility also plays a big part in what allows a new game to break out. How easy is the game to pick up? I know for me, I don't PC game really ever. So games like Lethal Company that I'm seeing get that social media hype and get that online presence, I'm not going to go play because, one, none of my friends are on PC, and two, I don't really play on PC to begin with. So I think, so when I'm saying accessibility, I guess I more so mean availability. How easy is the game to pick up and purchase? What's the price point, right? Because if you're talking about a $70 game, someone that might not play your single player epics, it might be a tough sell for them to slap down $70+ on a game they might not even like. It's easier to get something that's free to play, like a Fortnite or a Roblox or League. Minecraft's always on sale. GTA 5 is on sale a lot too. So the barrier to entry in terms of a price point for those very popular old games, quote unquote old games, is a lot lower based on that as well. You're taking a lot more of a leap of faith with your $70 on a new game that you might not like, and return policies nowadays are extremely fickle, so you might just be stuck with it. This data also ties into a topic we covered 2 episodes ago, I think, talking about live service games. You know, I mean, of these 5 old games that are 27% of playtime, Fortnite, Roblox, League, GTA 5, those are all live service games. I don't know if you'd count Minecraft as a live service game because you can just do single player stuff and that you don't necessarily have to do online stuff. But Fortnite, Roblox, League, and GTA, those are all live service games that are ridiculously successful and ridiculously profitable. So I think that speaks to, from a company standpoint, from a brand standpoint, the benefits of a live service game and what all these various companies want when they make a live service game. They want it to become a household name that, 10 years down the line, people are still playing and still making up more than a quarter of gamers' playtime. Unfortunately, that diamond in the rough that a lot of companies are looking for is a lot harder nowadays to get to than it was back when Fortnite came out. Back when League started. I don't even know when that was. I don't play League, but probably a long time ago. It's tough to make that breakout hit. One that comes to mind for me is Apex Legends. When that game came out, it had the backing of Respawn, the folks that, like myself, that were Titanfall fans, working some of those mechanics into a live service battle royale is kind of what made it have some staying power. But for every Apex, there's, a Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, or what's another terrible example? I was playing this game called Hawked, Hawked. That's like it's like an extraction shooter where you're underground. The servers are still on, but it's not really getting a lot of hype. I mean, for every Apex, there's a dozen other live service games that are going to fail. So it's like the definition of feast or famine when it comes to these live service games. And I really think that these 5 titans that we're talking about here that are live service are very much the exception and not the rule. But I think companies see dollar signs and they want to take their stab at it without really giving the proper foundation for what these live service games need to have a successful launch and to have the staying power to make people want to continue to play them. I think a lot of the time, companies just want that instant hit, that instant gratification, and that instant profit, of course, but they don't really think of it particularly far ahead. I mean, sure, you might get a content roadmap, right? I mean, shout out Marvel's Avengers. I reinstalled that the other day and played a little bit of it just because I love that game so much. But that game had a content roadmap that ended up being a detriment to the game itself because they had to keep moving deadlines and they had to keep, reworking what the content map was. And that's the surefire way to kill your live service game, because if you set up this roadmap where there are dates to hit and you don't hit those dates, people are going to fall off because there's no new content and there's no reason to keep coming back to this game. We get into the discussion of crunch, right, where it's something like a Fortnite. I don't remember. I don't have the details in front of me, but I remember there was a crunch story about that. And when you play Fortnite and they're pumping out new content every 2 weeks, whether that be unvaulting items or putting new things in or changing up the gameplay, it's a juggernaut for Epic, so they can dedicate the resources and the time to that. But there is an element of crunch to that where you have to keep feeding the beast. So on one hand, you've got the content roadmap that could, be your death knell if you don't end up following it. But then you don't want to overwork your workers to the point that they're crunching to keep up with the live service trend. And that's not even mentioning the development teams that work on these live service games that might get shut down within a month of their release. Rest in peace, Knockout City. I've mentioned that before, but that was a great game, in my opinion, that had a lot of potential. That it did get content updates, but I think the player base just fell off. And for me personally, me and my friends, we stopped playing because people just got way better than us, and we were just getting destroyed in every lobby. And I could do a whole show on MMR and how your skill-based matchmaking and my thoughts on that, and maybe I will if I'm desperate for topics. That's not really the live service game's fault. All live service games and all multiplayer games are going to have skill-based matchmaking. But again, that's another show. But I want to know, are you playing any of the games I mentioned today? Are you a Fortnite fan? Are you into Roblox? I know my friends and I tried Roblox once. It was a lot, and we couldn't really figure it out. But it does have an update like every week on PS5, so I'm sure they're adding new content. But yeah, let me know if you're playing any of these games. Are you in that 8% that's branching out and playing new games? Or are you more of the casual gamer that's playing the same 2 or 3 multiplayer shooters and then hopping off for the day? Let me know. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some more of the news. You're listening to No Credits Rolled.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. Talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, and we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done talking about some data from Newzoo about what people are playing. But now in this next segment, I decided to call it the News Roundup. I was going to make a cool jingle, but I ran out of time. So just imagine like a cool Old West cowboy song here for the News Roundup. Maybe I had some whip sound effects that I was pretty proud of. Some cracking, some horse galloping. But that didn't make it to air. Maybe one day, though. Anyway, so our first story here comes from IGN. Rebecca Valentine over at IGN. She's a fantastic reporter, but it's about the KOTOR remake, Knights of the Old Republic. For all my Star Wars fans out there, I know this one probably makes you cringe because we've been teased with this KOTOR remake for a long time now. And I thought it was dead for sure. I thought we weren't going to see any more of it, but alas, Rebecca Valentine over at IGN doing the Lord's work. She actually interviewed Saber Interactive CEO Matthew Karch, K-A-R-C-H. Saber is the team that took over from Aspyr to do this KOTOR remake. If you remember, again for all my Star Wars fans out there, Aspyr recently handled the Battlefront collection, the 1 and 2 collection, which was a complete disaster. So maybe it's a good thing they lost the project. But now Saber's doing it, which is cool because Saber, lightsaber, was that on purpose? Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, Rebecca Valentine talked to CEO Matthew Karch, and he said this, quote, "It's clear and it's obvious that we're working on this being the KOTOR remake." He said it's been in the press numerous times. What I will say is that the game is alive and well, and we're dedicated to making sure we exceed consumer expectations. A little bit of corporate speak in there, but hey, that's something, I guess. Is he saying that just to keep investors in? Is he saying that just to keep the name of the game in the press? Maybe a little bit of all that. The guy's a CEO, so I feel like he chooses his words very deliberately, especially in situations like this where he knows it's going to get a headline. But ultimately, what does this really mean, right? I don't think it means a whole lot. Embracer Group, which Saber left recently, Embracer Group held an earnings call after Saber left to announce the leaving. And Embracer Group, they implied on the earnings call that the game is still far away, perhaps in a galaxy far, far away. But like I said, the KOTOR remake used to be under development with Aspyr. They lost the project because of a lack of progress, which is maybe telling given the state of the Battlefront collection, which is essentially the same game ported with no changes, not even any performance improvements. It's the same game that it was 10 years ago. I could do a whole other episode on that as well, because I spoke about that Battlefront collection on this show and got very excited and was very let down by it. But anyway, Saber now has the project. When are we going to see this game? I have no idea. I think he was just Rebecca Valentine probably just wanted to get the confirmation from him that the game was still out there, just to kind of keep it in the public zeitgeist. I have no idea when we're going to see this game. I believe there was a thing where they took down that trailer that showed Revan like remade, that they took it down, but it was because of a music licensing thing, I think. I don't remember. That freaked a lot of people out because they were like, oh, if they're taking the trailer down, then are we going to ever see this game? I feel like this is just, especially with the success of Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, I feel like the KOTOR remake, if you give that the same treatment, is going to make you like $1 bajillion, right? Because people still rave about KOTOR 1 and 2, sort of, mostly 1. I've tried playing them. I just can't really, the game's so old. It's so old. So, and I know you probably hate me for saying that if you're like above the age of 30 and that was like your favorite Star Wars game ever. But, it's old. It's an old game. But again, it's that Final Fantasy VII comparison where that game is also really old, but it's beloved, and the remake of it is incredible. It's a new kind of game, and I think that's the exact same kind of treatment you got to give KOTOR here. I think if you give the KOTOR remake that budget and that, especially that level of production that the Final Fantasy remakes have, I think it's a shoo-in. I think people are going to be looking for something a little bit more than just a graphical upgrade. I think people are going to want, at least people my age, are going to want a gameplay shakeup, because the gameplay of that original game, in my opinion, is pretty dated. And it's confusing. That's why I never got particularly far in it. I think if you do something, again, the Final Fantasy comparison, how they changed up and made that a little more active, a little bit more involved, I think it could, have a lot more mass market appeal. And it's Star Wars, so you've already got a huge audience built in there. So we'll see where this goes. Like I said, I doubt we're going to hear anything about it anytime soon. If we do, I will be pleasantly surprised. And if we do, I hope it's something with some meat on the bones. Anyway, this next story really isn't news, but I put it in the show because I like Helldivers and I want an excuse to talk about it. We've got Helldivers patch notes, patch 01.000.200. For all of you keeping track at home, it's that number, patch note. It added all kinds of new stuff. We got some new planetary hazards, blizzards, and sandstorms. So far, my friends and I have only experienced the blizzards. They're very cool. It helps complete the Star Wars fantasy because you feel like you're on Hoth. And the immersiveness of the blizzards, very cool. You can make snowballs and throw snowballs at people. That's fun. They tweaked some enemy spawns, some mission types, adjusted the mechanics of others. There's like a civilian rescue mission. They've decreased the number of civilians you have to save. So I guess morally speaking, our duty to those extra civilians we're leaving behind is a little bit questionable. But hey, we don't make the rules. Some weapons got buffed, like the anti-material rifle, which I think is cool. The Breaker, Incendiary, and the Dominator have all been buffed. And the new heavy machine gun, which I'm a big fan of. It had its fire rate decrease, but who really noticed? Anyway, like I said, this isn't news. Not really, but I just wanted to include it because I like talking about this game. If you want more of my thoughts on it, you can listen to last week's episode where my pal Joe and I talked about it for about 30 minutes-ish. The game continues to be a ton of fun. My friends and I, it's in our rotation now of the games that we regularly play. We've got about 4 or 5 games we rotate around with, and Helldivers is definitely at the top. It's still a ton of fun, and every patch, it's something to look forward to. And I haven't really had that experience with the game in a while. I would say maybe back when we were deep in Fortnite and we were checking the patches, every time they came out to see what new weapons were added. We're back there. We're back there with Helldivers 2, and everything they add and every change they make, and finding it out in real time is a lot of fun. Not necessarily reading the patch notes before you do a couple matches, but then discovering that, oh, there's blizzards now, or there's this new environment you can play in. And it creates a sense of discovery that I think a lot of games that we, at least my friends and I play, are lacking. We play Apex, we play Siege, we know for the most part what we're getting into. But Helldivers has its own kind of, its own brand of fun, I think, that makes every mission continue to feel unique. and the game overall to just be an absolute slam dunk. Oh, there have also been teases of robot spaceships. I think those might be in the game. I don't know, but that looked cool. I hope they let us fly spaceships. There was also the very serious reclaiming of Malevelon Creek. There's a whole backstory to that I missed out on initially, but the collective we, have regained Malevelon Creek, and everybody got a cape for it. And it's things like that really contribute to the community feeling of this game. You know, everybody was wondering if they were going to use some kind of April Fool's joke for Helldivers 2, but instead there was this big push to everyone, for all the troopers, or all the players, troopers, who can really tell anymore, to regain these couple planets. And I think the time was 24 hours to do it, but the player base did it in 5, which is pretty cool. And then everybody got a commemorative, cosmetic cape to commemorate the event. I don't know. I think stuff like that is cool. It brings me back to when I used to play Star Wars: The Old Republic online, an MMO. But it's that sense of community, really, and I really don't feel that in a whole lot of other games. So, Helldivers 2, go check it out if you haven't already. All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to get into the review portion of the show, where I'm going to be talking about Dragon's Dogma 2. We'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
All right, and we're back on No Credits Rolled. We just got done discussing the news for this week, and now we're going to talk some reviews. This week I'm talking about Dragon's Dogma 2. This review has been a long time coming. I have been obsessed with this game. I say that a lot. But when a game captures my imagination and really captures my time, I think it's especially worth talking about on this show. But Dragon's Dogma 2 is a fantasy action RPG coming from Capcom, developed and published by Capcom. It's using the RE engine, which kind of looks good sometimes. I'll get more into that in a second. The game isn't perfect. It's captured my attention since it came out a couple weeks ago. Whenever I'm not online with my friends, this is the game I've been going to. Whenever I'm not in the multiplayer space, I'm booting up Dragon's Dogma 2, and I'm running around. I'm maybe doing a side quest or just existing in this world because it's just so much fun. My top level thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2. The game is a lot of fun, but it's not without its flaws. It's not a game I can recommend to everyone, but if you can power through the more obtuse aspects of it, the gameplay and the world is where Dragon's Dogma 2 really shines. Some positives I have here. Overall, there's like 2 big positives that I want to highlight. The world is very immersive and feels very lived in and dynamic. I think that's the best way to describe it. There's a lot of dynamic moments that can happen throughout regular gameplay. For example, the fast travel in the game kind of works where you take these ox carts, these carriages that ride from city to city, and you have the option to ride in real time, but I wouldn't recommend that. You can doze off, which is essentially skipping time, and your character will just wake up in the next whatever the destination is. But along the way, you can be attacked. You can be attacked by bandits or goblins or griffins or trolls or whatever. And you have to fight those things off. And these encounters are completely dynamic. They're not staged. I don't know how they did it, honestly. Everything in the world has its own pattern of existing. And when these patterns overlap, you get these really cool dynamic moments. One example of that is the ox carts, where you wake up and you suddenly have to fight an ogre. You get back on the cart, go to your destination. But while you're fighting that ogre, some goblins might show up, or another group of heroes might show up they're all NPCs. It's not a multiplayer game, but this other troop of adventurers might show up and join in and help you fight. And then after the fact, you can hire some of those people to join your party. They're called pawns, which is a little dystopian, but they're called pawns, and they can join your party as NPCs and help you out. There's, the different classes, which I'll get to in a second. But it's moments like that really stand out for me. For example, I was fighting a griffin, like a big bird monster thing, and then a troll showed up, and I was like, well, this is going to be tough to fight both. Then they started fighting each other. So I just ran away, and I was like, oh, well, that deals with itself. Time passes in real time, so if you go to an inn and rest like 5 times in a row, all the food in your inventory will rot, and you just can't eat any of it. Different NPCs in cities will go about their daily lives, whether that be a merchant or if, I've got a quest right now where I have to tail this beggar, this like homeless guy, but he walks a specific route during the day before he posts up where he does his show, like his little act, I guess, where you have to meet him. So I'm like waiting all day for him to show up to the spot, and I'm still waiting. And, as the time goes by, and I'm just sitting on this bench waiting for this guy to show up because it's the pattern he does in his daily life. The combat is the other big standout of the game. I'm playing as a warrior, which is an extra class you get in the game. I think the initial classes, they're called vocations, but they're basically classes. It's like your typical affair, your thief class, your wizard class, your warrior class, and then you can unlock a handful more as you go, depending on if you find certain weapon types, that allows you to unlock the other branches. But the warrior, he has a big giant sword, and that was why I went for that vocation, because I think that's cool, and I think anytime I can get a big giant sword, I'm going to get a big giant sword. But one of the mechanics in the game for when you're fighting these larger enemies like trolls and ogres and things like that, there's a stagger system. Oh, there's also minotaurs. Don't forget about the minotaurs. There's a stagger system and a balance system. So you can knock enemies off balance and then push them over and then crawl on them and continue to do damage. But that balance and the way they fall is all dynamic. So if you push them off like a bridge, they'll just fall, and that's it. That's the end of their story. There's a clip that, if I can remember, I'll put it in for the video version of the show. But I was fighting this ogre or cyclops, and I climbed up on its head. If you've ever played Shadow of the Colossus, it's a lot like that, but on a smaller scale. You're not fighting colossi, but, they're like 50, 40 feet tall. So I climb up on this ogre's head, and I with my big giant sword, I drive the sword into his head, and like if you hold down Y, you do the heavy attack, but if you continue to hold it down, you do it even longer. So I drive the sword into his head, and then I yank it out as he's falling, and it kills him. But it was like the most epic thing I've done in the game in a very long time, and it was all dynamic. Like I had to climb up on the guy's back, I had to get in the right position so that the heavy attack would trigger. And I had to hold it and risk the extra time, hanging on to this guy to do the maximum amount of damage and take him out. And I've done that maneuver multiple times because if you have a big giant sword, you're going to use it. And it never gets old. This game makes you feel so cool when you do your abilities and you figure things out. And it's really, really impressive. And it's why I keep coming back to it, that and the dynamic world. Different pawns can do different things. So if you've got like an archer in your class, or in your party rather, he'll start firing before you even get to the fight with your sword, and he can take a couple guys out. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, I highly recommend you play this game, because you can definitely convince yourself that it's a Lord of the Rings game. With, you've got your Legolas, you have your archer, you can make your guy just look like Gandalf, so you can have a Gandalf kind of wizard, you can have your Aragorn. It's enough of the fantasy of Lord of the Rings for me that I can sell it. You can imbue your weapons with elemental abilities. So there was a moment, another little anecdote, where I was climbing like this hill, and I was leading the party, so some of my party members had fallen behind, and one of them got caught in slime, like sentient slime, and they were being like devoured. So I turn around and I pull my sword out, and my you can give pawn commands to like tell your pawns to attack or to heal you or to stay behind or whatever. So I tell them to attack, and my mage in my party charges up my sword with lightning, and I run down this hill and I leap off the hill and I come down on the slime and hit it with my electric sword. And it was like, it was so cool. And the moment came out of nowhere. It wasn't part of a main quest. It wasn't scripted. This moment was completely dynamic. And, I felt like the coolest kid on planet Earth doing this cool jump. And I think that's really what makes this game so special, is that these awesome moments, these epic moments that you want to clip and send to all your friends, they can happen at any time. And it's really like, it's really impressive. And it's something that I haven't really experienced since I would compare it to a Baldur's Gate, but obviously the combat in Baldur's Gate is a lot different. It's not as in the moment, real time, because it is turn-based. But that sense of you do something and it works and you feel really cool and you pat yourself on the back for it definitely comes up a lot in this game. I already mentioned the crawling on enemies. It's awesome, and I recommend if you do buy the game, you do it as often as you can, because you can hit different weak points and you can knock weapons out of people's hands, or you can do different attacks depending on where you are on the monster's body. Really, really neat stuff. Again, if you played Shadow of the Colossus, it's a little bit like that in terms of the feeling of climbing around. I think the soundtrack to the game is pretty good too. It's nothing like crazy, right? It's your standard fantasy epic music. But I think it really helps to punctuate those big moments, especially if they're happening outside of a main quest and you just do something cool and the music is going way harder than it needs to, just to, really back up that moment. I think it does a great job there. Now, I do have some negatives for the game. No game is perfect. And I think this game in particular, I think, has some issues that might immediately turn some people off, despite the fact that I'm raving about it. The performance of the game, the technical performance, not great. I'm playing on an Xbox Series X, so I've seen some folks on PC with like ridiculous rigs that are getting much more impressive performance. But if you're a console gamer, you're going to experience some chugging. Frame rates drop left and right, especially in large areas like a city or during hectic moments of combat. You're very rarely going to be at a steady 60 FPS. There also aren't a whole lot of visual settings in the game on console side. You can't turn off motion blur. You can't adjust there really aren't many things you can adjust. There's no performance versus resolution settings, which is always annoying for me because I'm a big stickler for frame rate. I dunk on Pokemon a lot, Scarlet and Violet, because of how terrible that game runs. But for me, like, I can understand why people played so much Pokemon, because despite the technical issues of this game, I'm still playing a ton of it, right? I'm able to look past the frame rate drops and the chugging that the game encounters just because I'm having so much fun. So, for those Pokemon fans out there that I bashed your game, I do apologize. I see the appeal now. It's just, for me, frame rate's such a big thing that I notice so like immediately. But to this game's credit, it's so much fun that I'm able to look past it. So, in terms of story, the plot is really not present. There is a story, but I am not really paying attention to it because it's mostly delivered through large exposition dumps. As so far that I can tell, you are the Arisen. That's like your character's title. There's a cool cutscene in the beginning of the game. This isn't really a spoiler. It's in like the first like hour, where you're fighting this like giant dragon, and the dragon like completely, he basically kills you, and then he rips your heart out and eats it. But that makes you the Arisen. So that allows you to enter this like spirit realm and summon pawns, and that's about as much of the story as I have grasped so far. Like I said, I'm not a big story guy. I've definitely missed a lot of things, and that's a complaint. That's a me problem for sure. I have a difficult time following the stories of most games because I don't really pay attention. I'm mostly in it for gameplay, unless it's something I deliberately lock in and pay attention to the story for and turn off other distractions. But for this game, I wasn't really taking the story super seriously because I was having so much fun with the gameplay. But if you are someone that wants a narrative-focused, a narrative-forward game, especially when it comes to these fantasy RPGs, I wouldn't necessarily say that's where this game shines. This game shines in your combat and in just existing in this world. Another thing that I didn't know going in is that everybody talks like they're in a Shakespearean play. I guess they were trying to go for like a period piece thing with the dialogue. It's really weird and off-putting at first, especially if you're not used to people talking that way. Because we're in 2024, and I certainly don't talk like I'm in Othello, but everyone in this game does, and it does take some getting used to. But once you get used to it, it's not that bad. I only have it down as a negative because for me it was so jarring at first that I had to do extra mental gymnastics to figure out what people were saying to me. But yeah, everybody kind of talks with that, like, I don't know if it's Shakespearean or medieval. If you've ever gone to the Ren Fair and like people do that fake English accent and they use like they say ye and things like that, it's like that. And it's a little weird, but again, you get used to it relatively quickly. The save system is not great. I don't think anything will ever top Baldur's Gate save system, or it's like 2 buttons to quick save. In this one, you can quick save, but it's not super accurate. It's not, I quick save right before I do this fight. I go into the fight, I die, I get a party wipe, I can immediately reload to that point. It's a little bit looser with where that save point's actually going to restore you. I've lost a lot of progress because I neglected to save regularly, and when you die, which by the way, you can die like really easily. Water, at least at this point in the game, if you fall in water, like you just instantly die. The water is like evil. I don't know if I missed something, but if you or your pawns go in the water, all these like tentacles come out and kill you. Your pawns instantly die from that. You will take a hit of your health, but then get spawned back on shore. But if you fall in and that chunk of health they take kills you, then you are dead. Not really sure what the deal is with that. You do have a main pawn that you pick at the beginning of the game, and that pawn can always be revived there's like spirit stones. You can always revive that pawn, so you're not getting complete party wipes. But I have had it where I'm journeying from one city to the next on foot, and all my pawns fall off a cliff into the river and die, and I'm alone until I get to town and can revive my other pawn. And that ties back in with the save system, because when you die, you can either load your last save or you can load your last inn rest when you rest at an inn. And it doesn't tell you the time on that. It doesn't tell you how long it's been since you've done either of those things. So there was a moment in the beginning of the game where I hit the load the last inn rest because I was like, I don't know when either was, when I saved or when I last rested. Yeah, I ended up losing like an hour and a half of gameplay. So my recommendation is, if you're playing, save often and note, you don't have to literally note it, but just kind of mentally note when you rest at these inns. And it's tough at first because the inns are expensive to rest at. You get money pretty quickly. But in the beginning of the game, you're not always able to rest at an inn because it's like 2,000 gold, which you don't have that kind of money in the beginning of the game. I think it would be a pretty easy fix if they just added times. Like if they said this was the time you last saved versus this was the time you last rested at an inn. Seems like a pretty easy fix. And if you listen to other reviews about this game, there is a PS3, an Xbox 360-ness about this game that is tough to describe. If you played the original Dragon's Dogma, which I played a little bit of it, this sequel, like 10 years later, feels like it could have came out relatively recently after the first game. Aspects of this game feel old, but like, I don't know if it's a bad thing. Honestly. I think they stuck to their guns on what they wanted to do, and I admire that. But there are some quality of life things that you might expect from a modern RPG that are not necessarily in this game. I mentioned the saves. What else? Oh, there's only 2 races that you can choose from to create your character. The character creator is very detailed in terms of sculpting and proportions and dimensions of your character. But the 2 races are human or cat person, so you got to be okay with one of those. I went with a cat person just because I thought he looked cool. I made him like a lion man. But like, it's crazy to me that those are the 2 choices. It's like were there cat people on, like, not literally cat people on the development team, but people that just liked cats and were like, we're sticking to this. We're putting cat people in this game. I don't know. It's very strange. But those are your choices. And maybe there's a lore reason. I think people like discriminate against the cat people. I've noticed some dialogue about that. Again, not really paying attention to that. That's my fault. But if you want to play as like an elf, there are elves in the game. I've met some, but you can't make your character one. So I don't know. That's a little weird. And that's one of those things that makes it feel a little bit dated. And then, yeah, the frame rate is also what makes it feel dated because, 30 FPS is bringing me back to 2012. But if you're a fantasy action fan and you've got a tolerance to learn the game's mechanics, which they do take some